Greetings, my fellow Americans. This is your President Samuel Ronan speaking, and today is Worldwide Wednesdays. And since I need to get used to doing this, if you like the channel and if you like me as a political face and candidate and activist and this, that, and the other, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends, family, neighbors, co-workers, and anyone else that you come across on the street. Today is Worldwide Wednesday. We are going to be covering a whole lot of news, not least of which is what America is doing to the rest of the world, what Israel is doing to the rest of the world, and then, of course, random sundries that are impacting the world, such as Cuba on the brink of economic collapse thanks to an ongoing blockade by the United States. So, definitely things that we need to discuss, talk about, be aware of, and, well, get riled up over, because what's happening in America is bad enough, but the fact that what is happening in America is seeping out into the world makes it that much worse. So, hello, Anna, and yes, thank you for the plug. Is that what that is? Oh, goody. Now I've got my Super Saiyan 12 hair going. I gotta look stylish for the people. Okay, I am ludicrously tired, so if I just start going off on a tangent, just bring me back to earth, okay? So let's get into the... Okay, here we go. Let's get into the videos, and let's see if rage wakes me up, because, well, maybe not this one, but I'm sure... I mean, look. We got some inducing videos.
Welcome back, everyone. For years, Cuba's ally Venezuela provided the small island nation with nearly half of its oil, a small lifeline for an already crippled economy. With the arrest and U.S. indictment of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, and with pressure from the U.S., oil shipments to Cuba have now stopped. Today, Cuba won.
You know, I like how we say the arrest and indictment of Venezuelan president as if we weren't the ones that kidnapped the Venezuelan president and then trafficked the president to America and then gave some slapstick charges against him for no fucking reason. Hello, Leia. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, I don't know that we're going to watch the whole part of this particular video clip, but the propaganda, the imperialist news is coming on strong.
Warned international airlines that they will no longer be able to supply planes with jet fuel for at least a month. With rolling blackouts across Cuba, questions remain: how will Cuba survive without the aid of oil from Venezuela or other countries and stave off a humanitarian crisis? Here's ABC's Matt Rivers.
Havana, Cuba. The country's communist government has been plagued with problems over its 6 decades in power. Many.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I have to keep interrupting here. Communist Cuba has been plagued with problems for the past 6 decades due to American influence, specifically the United States of America. Explicitly because of the United States of America, but they're not going to bring that up. So I just...
of its own making. Corruption. Havana, Cuba. The country's communist government has been plagued with problems over its 6 decades in power, many of its own making.
Anna, thank you for picking this video, because the rage is waking me up. So, ABC has already, in this first 60 seconds, has already completely rewritten history. History that was just written not even a few weeks ago by the United States with Venezuela, and is now completely erasing the history of what's been happening to Cuba by blaming Cuba for the embargoes and blockades that America has been leveraging against them for decades. And we haven't even gotten to the meat of the story yet. Like, absolute fuckery with this propaganda.
Corruption, aging infrastructure, hurricanes, a struggling economy, international isolation, all pushing today's Cuba to the brink of a humanitarian crisis, and often leaving the island's streets blanketed in darkness. Blackouts, some lasting nearly all day, a common occurrence now. Using only the light of her phone, Idaña Acosta pours water from a bucket into a small pot for her family's daily needs. The water, used to cook, bathe, and drink, will have to last Idaña, her 2 children, and her ailing mother until the next shipment comes in 10 days.
Los niños están, por supuesto, sin comer, llegan de la escuela, mamá que hambre, no sé cuánto, hay que esperar a que venga la corriente.
Unión Eléctrica recorded that 60 to 70% of the island went without electricity in December after a nationwide blackout left around 10 million Cubans without power for several days. Families like the Acostas work and eat by candlelight as the city softly hums with overworked generators. When the power grid doesn't work, only those lucky enough to have generators and enough gas to run them can keep the lights on. And the situation is only expected to get worse.
I think we can stop it right there because we're not going to watch a tearjerker video from ABC about the crisis happening in Cuba as if we weren't the ones specifically causing it. And they even admitted, international influence causing it. So, again, capitalism and Western imperialism goes out of its way to isolate and destroy any country and any government that refuses to bend the knee to capitalism. And Cuba is one of the longest standing victims who have survived and resisted that influence for 6+ decades. So, as much as we can watch this and be like, wow, this is really unfortunate for Cuba, what really and truly matters is that Cuba has survived in spite of 6 decades of global interventionism and isolation. 6 decades of deliberate manufacturing of this crisis. So, we will focus on that aspect of it. All of that happens in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, both capitalist countries in the Caribbean. Capitalism causes it. Right. Because they want to turn those islands into luxury resorts. And the same is true for Cuba. Cuba's a beautiful country and a beautiful land, but they just don't want poor brown people living in it. They just don't want non-Western imperialists living in it. They want rich imperialists owning the entire land and putting up their vistas and villas and forcing the inhabitants to be their work. Their help, right? Taking care of their houses and the luxury resorts. So, I mean, this is becoming a significantly more overt operation of basically enslavement. As we are seeing, when these countries collapse economically, all of the Western countries come in, offer their aid and support, rebuild the areas that they want rebuilt, and then the poverty gets pushed out of those rebuilt areas, and then wealthy individuals start coming in. We have seen it in Puerto Rico. We have seen it in the Dominican Republic. We have seen it in Cuba. We have seen it happen all across Latin America, and it is the actual plan that is being presented for Palestine. Except they're taking it significant steps further by creating prison cities, and I think we're going to be covering that Israel is going to revoke the citizenship of Palestinians out of their own fucking country. So, there is that. And yes, lest we forget the genocide.
Cars are still on the road, shops remain open, and people are going about their daily business in Havana. But scratch the surface, and Cuba is under new strain since the Trump administration announced it would impose tariffs on any country that ships fuel to the island nation. The black market price of petrol has more than doubled. Transport costs have spiked. University classes cancelled. Students have been told to study from home. Student Ruben Guerra worries whether he'll even be able to graduate, but he says that's no longer his main concern.
I'm scared because I don't know what's going to happen, whether we might be invaded, whether the national power grid could collapse, and what will become of life here.
Public healthcare has been hit too. Vital and emergency surgeries are ongoing, but elective surgeries have been postponed. This is the National Institute of Gastroenterology. Last week it was running. Now, for lack of fuel, it's been shuttered.
And again, this crisis is being manufactured by the United States, actively engaging in sabotage to their natural resources and their trade economy. By literally invading Venezuela and taking control of their oil, Venezuelan oil, they have effectively crippled the entire Cuban infrastructure. So we are literally occupying Venezuela, and in so doing are crippling Cuba. And then we're going to threaten the rest of the world if they support Cuba. Now, again, we have found out that the tariffs don't really hurt other countries, it hurts ourselves, so I'm not really understanding what the point there is. But suffice to say, the threats are coming from America, the United States, and the rest of the world is following suit because they don't want the ire of the U.S. Drew Steele's going to make his own documentary. Let's go. Melania Trump isn't the only one who needs a documentary. Hell yeah. So, you're going to make a documentary on your own life, or what are you making the documentary on? Then they'll say that Cuba collapsed because of communism, right? Which they have been trying to do and push for the past 60 years. And if anything, communism has caused Cuba to survive 60 years of international blockade and isolationism, which is nothing but a small miracle given that Cuba is a literal island and therefore does require trade to meet its basic needs in modern times. So the fact that a communist country that is small in both population and landmass, that is not just literally isolated, but also economically and culturally isolated, has been able to survive as a country with minimal support from other allied countries. That is proof that communism works, if anything. Just throwing it out there. My own life, which positions me as a Alexander the Great type figure. I mean, okay, I'm here for it. I'll get a free screening, right? I'll get a pre-screening before it's released to the general public. I want a private screening sesh. All right.
Dr. Pablo Gaviria says that already fewer ambulances are going out, and he's being forced to make even harder decisions about who receives surgery.
The ones who are going to suffer are the people. The weakest, most vulnerable will bear the brunt of this blockade. And these are the same people who the US says they want to save. Yet they are being deprived of healthcare, deprived of electricity, deprived of transportation to get to work, because everything depends on fuel.
Despite the fear, the streets are calm. There's a genuine resilience here. Hardship is nothing new to Cubans.
Right, because Cubans have been resisting Western imperialism since before Fidel Castro. So, I mean, yeah, they are literally not going to give in to more fear-mongering and scare tactics. And true, Anna is in America right now and needs access to a doctor, but she can't access the doctor because she's priced out from it, just like hundreds of thousands of millions of Americans are priced out of healthcare. So it's not like capitalism is better at providing services for the public good, because it isn't. Communism is, in that sense, significantly better. And you know what would be even better than that? Socialism. And you know what would be even better than that? Ronanism. But that's not the point. The point is that all of the things that capitalists blame communists for are literally the things that capitalists cause. Right? Well, communists don't have access to healthcare. Literally, you can't afford healthcare in a capitalist country. You just can't. We're not even getting reasonable electricity prices because we're building data centers in every single small town and across the country. So, like, everything capitalism accuses communism of being guilty of is literally indictment of itself, which is the same modus operandi that conservatives use to blame Democrats on. Well, Democrats are going to take your guns, strip away your rights, and usher in fascism. And literally, that's what this administration has done since day one. I want Pablo to be my doctor. Yeah, I mean, I bet he's much better qualified as a doctor coming from Cuba than any American doctor who can pretty much pay for their degrees as long as mommy and daddy are major donors to the college. It's absolutely disgusting how healthcare is treated as a commodity, regardless of receiving it and or becoming part of the healthcare system. Oh, and he's hot. Okay, I see. My bad. I missed that. Oh, muy caliente. Ay, papi. Oh, Dios mío. Una cerveza, por favor. Okay.
The streets are calm. There's a genuine resilience here. Hardship is nothing new to Cubans. Still, there's a widespread feeling that this is the worst crisis in the island's recent history.
Por lo menos, me he cuestionado.
I've asked myself whether, if things get really difficult and I have the chance to leave the country, I would do it. I don't like the idea at all. I love my country, my culture, the people, everything, but I don't see any other solution.
Experts,
which is part of the point, right? Forcing people to flee so that they, in order to be accepted from their fleeing, is that they have to denounce Cuba and then thus continue to perpetrate the story and byline that communism is evil and causing problems, which is unironically what the Cubans did here in America, what the Venezuelan refugees and migrants did in America, and then the country, the United States, invaded them and betrayed those people regardless. So it's always the actions of the colonizer, of the empire. That's what they do. They come in, they offer solutions, and then when that doesn't work, when they offer technology and resources and it gets rejected, then they manufacture problems and then force those problems onto the people that they want to conquer or to subjugate. And then when there's resistance, they make it even less tenable to resist, or to survive for that matter. And then when people inevitably flee the conditions that the empire created, the empire welcomes them with open arms under the condition that they denounce the place that they're fleeing. And then when they are promised integration and the opportunity to be part of the empire, right when they are given that chance, right when it is finally being finalized, the ink is beginning to dry, that is when the rug is pulled on them and they end up getting othered, either exiled or imprisoned or rounded up or some other thing, so that the ultimate point, which was their removal from the process, was finalized. Now, I get that I'm struggling to I'm struggling to but what I'm trying to get at is what we are doing to Cuba, what we are doing to Venezuela, historically, is what countries have done when they wanted to occupy other regions, other areas, or to displace indigenous peoples. And we are seeing it happening in real time. Nothing has changed. We have not evolved past feudalism. We have not evolved past Stone Age warfare. Just because we have electricity, rocket ships, and the internet doesn't mean we still aren't effectively treating each other as if we had clubs and stones and just invented fire. Because fundamentally, our diplomacy and our interactions with one another still amount to Stone Age principles. Ug-tug, 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 right? Like, it's, you have things, we want them, we're bigger than you, and we're going to take it whether you like it or not. If you comply with our set of rules, we might allow you to live until we find it too inconvenient. And as we are seeing in the United States of America, we invited all of these countries' refugees, all of these countries' immigrants and migrants, welcomed them with open arms, created all sorts of programs for them, and right when things were beginning to get settled, a president that was born from the quagmire of racism and xenophobia that has been permeating the United States since its inception, finally emerged as the swamp monster himself and decided to betray all of those promises. Which was inevitable, by the way. If it wasn't going to be Trump, it was going to be somebody. And arguably, we could say it started with Obama. And, well, no, because it started in 2003. It started with Bush, Obama expanded on it, and then Trump took it all the way home. This has been a bipartisan effort, which is why I said it is inevitable. It was inevitable. If Trump hadn't done it, a Democrat would have. And we saw that a Democrat, Biden himself, aided and abetted the genocide of an entire people for 2 straight years of his administration. His only term as in president, he was in it for love of the game. He wasn't even blackmailed. From what we can tell so far, he wasn't even in the Epstein files. He was just murdering brown people for love of the game. So, our country, the United States of America, has been and would have engaged in these kinds of atrocities eventually, regardless. So, just wanting to throw that out there.
In international humanitarian law, so the US's economic war on Cuba amounts to collective punishment of the civilian population. And under what amounts to an oil blockade, Cubans are feeling the strain more than ever. Ed Agustin, Havana, Al Jazeera.
Oh, here we go. Rubio.
According to President Donald Trump, we are in high-level negotiations with Cuban officials. According to Cuban officials, that's not happening at all. Let's roll Donald Trump from last weekend.
What do you want out of a Cuba deal?
Well, Cuba's a failing nation. It has been for a long time, but now it doesn't have Venezuela to Cuba, like Cuba. So is invention.
Where you had...
Okay, breaking points. Why do you give Trump so much screen time? Why do you give him so much space in your videos? I don't fucking understand it, and it's infuriating.
Both publicly, you had top Cuban officials saying there are not talks happening, and privately, the drop site, multiple Cuban officials told us we would love to have talks about everything. Democracy, human rights, direct foreign investment, Trump, Havana, like you name it. Mm-hmm. They see that the objective conditions are changing, and they are open to negotiations. They're like, we will talk.
If you can do Mara Gaza, why not turn some of that investment towards Havana? I mean, in all seriousness, people when you have Jared Kushner out at Davos being like, "Here's my slideshow."
Right. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, but see, that's kind of the problem. Cuba's like, hey, if you're going to go ahead and colonize Palestine after engaging in ethnic cleansing, can you just invest in us without the ethnic cleansing? Like, that's still really fucking bad that you're pointing at the entire ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Literally telling Palestinians to leave their ancestral lands and either go into a prison city or leave the country altogether so that you can build a resort town. And you're using that example as like, hey, we're even willing to negotiate that. Like, bro, that's awful. Like, that is how fucked. If that's what the leadership is considering, that's like, hey, if you're going to turn the Gaza Strip into a resort, can you please do that here in Cuba rather than blockading us? You may as well just shoot yourselves in the street, commit mass suicide, because that is what you are effectively asking for. You are asking to be ethnically cleansed. And I can't imagine that that's really the conversations that are happening, because that's, did I mishear that?
Told us we would love to have talks about everything. Democracy, human rights, direct foreign investment, Trump, Havana, like you name it. Mm-hmm. They see that the objective conditions are changing, and they are open to negotiations. They're like, we will talk.
If you can do Mara Gaza, why not turn some of that investment towards Havana?
Oh, okay. I jumped. I got ahead of myself. That was her saying it. My bad. I am not running on full steam. I'm probably at 60% right now. So, okay. I ran with what she said. My bad.
I mean, in all seriousness, people when you have Jared Kushner out at Davos being like, "Here's my slideshow."
Right. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And so a senior administration official told us, we were like, well, why is Trump saying that? He said, quote, he's saying that because that's what Marco is telling him. So,
I mean, invoke the 25th. Trump is parroting what he is being told. Marco told me we're having talks with Cuba, and all of Cuba is saying, no, we're not. as the President of the United States, you would think you would follow up. I mean, granted, as President of the United States, you appoint these people into these various positions and you just trust that they do their jobs and that what they are telling you is actually what's happening, right? To be fair, if I appointed a Secretary of State and I asked my Secretary of State, hey, what's going on with Cuba? And they said, oh, don't worry, we're in communication. I would like to think I could take that at face value. To be fair. But I would also expect, if that's not happening, for somebody within my administration to tell me, like, hey, Mr. President, your Secretary of State just lied to you. There are no talks. The Cuban leadership are publicly saying, what talks? We would love to be a part of the talks. And yeah, this is actually a problem. You look like a jackass on the international stage. Bet. Because that Secretary of State would be fired and then charged with what? Sedition? Treason? Because, like, why would you lie to me about something like that? Like, why would you act on your own accord to absolutely destroy diplomatic relations with another country and then lie to my face about it? And again, this isn't the first time Marco Rubio has done this. And the fact that Trump isn't even attempting to, like, follow up or follow through or verify or corroborate after all of these incidents where Marco is just feeding him bullshit, like, at what point do you question his ability to cognitively function? Like, I'm barely at 60% right now, and these are the thoughts that went through my head. Yes, I should be able to trust my Secretary of State, but I should also be able to, you know, pay attention to the news. You know, trust that my Chief of Staff would be on top of things, right? Because, again, Marco Rubio, is he acting on his own? Where is the Chief of Staff? Shouldn't the Chief of Staff be following up on what Marco Rubio says and be like, no, Marco's full of shit, Mr. President. Here, as your Chief of Staff, I'm here to protect you and be the first line of defense. Like, that doesn't make sense. Either A, the administration is so piss poorly managed that chain of command and that buffer between the presidency and the actions of the administration doesn't exist, or it's just his own lack of cognitive abilities that are becoming painfully obvious to everyone with two brain cells to rub together. But let's continue.
According to our sources, Marco Rubio is telling Trump, yes, there are these high-level negotiations going on, with the idea being that in a couple weeks or a couple months, he'll say, you know, we tried, and it didn't happen. They were recalcitrant. You know, you can't trust these commies, so we just need to do, you know, complete and total regime change. He wanted to do complete regime change in Venezuela. He lost that argument, but he did get rid of Maduro. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to just replace the president of Cuba with another president from the Communist Party.
Well, and that's a significant distinction between Venezuela and Cuba at this point. I mean, Cuba has, you can explain this better, but the odds that if you tap in somebody in Cuba, you don't necessarily have a compliant Delcy Rodriguez in Cuba because you have this, like, vast infrastructure.
Although at this point you might, like, because they're
that's the question. Because
they're so beaten down.
Right, but I mean, like, Cuba has a decades-long tradition of communism.
It's a one-party state.
Yeah.
So Trump has cut off all oil. He told Mexico, if you send any oil, you're getting tariffed and sanctioned. And so Cuba has responded by cutting fuel to significant parts of the island, focusing on the tourist area where that brings in hard currency and nursing homes and hospitals. They're trying to scale up solar panel installation as fast as they possibly can, but it's dire. Like, it's a crisis level situation. Now what's interesting is into this.
So I mean, and that is kind of the point too, right? Like, to some degree, this situation is partially the government of Cuba's fault, because there are alternative energy and fuel sources that you could integrate even in an aging electrical grid or infrastructure, right? Hydrogen can literally be retrofitted into diesel engine machinery. So it's not like you take a diesel engine, you add a couple parts, and all of a sudden it can handle hydrogen fuel. But it has to do with the way diesel is turned into an energy source within an engine and all of the parts that that integrates. Hydrogen is somehow similar enough that you don't have to rip out a whole new engine, a whole new exhaust system, and a whole new whatever else. There are some things that you can replace and then largely modernize. Now that's diesel, right? As an example. But you also, again, have things like solar panels, which we have an aging power grid in the United States. We haven't modernized that sucker probably since the 60s or the 70s, right? So the fact that solar is being pushed back into the energy grids that weren't designed for it, but most of them are still holding strong, proves that even with Cuba's electrical grid, with an investment in solar panels, you could definitely overcome this reliance on diesel fuel and petroleum and generators. Secondly, it's an island. Why aren't there more sea generators or turbine generators or just water plants, like water energy generation plants? Like, why is there not more of this clean energy infrastructure? Now, some could argue that that's part of that isolationism, and maybe that is the reason, right? I don't know nearly enough about Cuban history to really go into that much detail with it, but you would think there would be the opportunity to increase the investment in clean energy alternatives over the past at least 10, 15 years as like trade relations and diplomatic relations improved with Cuba, America, and the rest of the world. But either A, I'm wrong, which is quite possible, or B, there was limitations to what those diplomatic and trade relations allowed, and maybe it wasn't clean energy alternatives. It could have very well have been that. So, one more reason to remove our reliance on oil and gas regardless, because when that eventually dries up, what are we going to start doing? Invading Russia and China for their solar panels? Are we going to invade Europe for their solar panels? Or for their hydrogen turbines? Or for whatever else? Because if we're going to rely on oil and then we run out and we have all this infrastructure relying on automotives and rail and airline, and hell, our military runs on fuel, right? On oil and gas. So, it's a national security concern if we don't modernize as well, which is, again, I don't understand the mindset that we have to focus on oil when it is a finite resource and it will eventually run out.
Confusing situation, came a report that there were actually talks going on between Cuban officials and the CIA in Mexico. And look, let me be extremely clear. That is possible.
Yeah.
The CIA is capable of doing things secretly that I am not immediately able to discover. That it is possible. Like, there are rumors out there that John Ratcliffe met with Raul Castro's son.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a rumor that's out there. It might be true. I don't know. I don't know where Ratcliffe is every single day. Okay? So just saying that. Might be true.
I thought he was your boss.
Yeah, that's right. He runs all of this. But where does this news actually come from? So let's put up this next element, because this is an amazing kind of meta media story. Because we're
if Raul Castro ends up being an American asset in Cuba, Fidel will literally rise from the grave and start invading America. Like, there is no fucking way that a relative of Fidel Castro would really become an asset of the United States. But then again, RFK Jr. is one of the greatest betrayers of our country's history. literally aiding and abetting fascism, literally dismantling decades of medical science and undermining it to boot. And he is the literal son of RFK, the original RFK, who was assassinated for trying to take on the powers that be in the United States. Oh, and JFK also famously assassinated for trying to take on the powers that be in the United States. RFK Jr. is a direct descendant from those two men. So you know what? Maybe Raul Castro is 100% a going to portray Cuba and all that it stood for decades. Maybe that's very well possible.
We're gonna talk about how kind of news becomes news. So Politico wrote this article / newsletter with a headline, "Could a Castro become our man in Havana?" And it's about these meetings between the alleged meetings between Raul Castro's son and the CIA happening down in Mexico. But then if you read through the Politico report, here's basically a timeline of how this happens. So February 2nd, Politico report's published. Go backwards, February 2nd, article in 14Y Medio that basically reports that these talks are happening. That's by a kind of dissident blogger who lives in Havana, and she, well-known blogger who was critical of the government. She had written that these talks were happening. But then
So wait a minute. Politico writes an article 8 hours after an anti-Cuban an anti-Cuba blog writes something that could be damning, and then Politico, which is supposed to be a trusted news source, regurgitates it? So Agusana is saying that this is happening, right? Like, what? Okay. We're getting mired in the woods here, but suffice to say, Cuba is suffering greater now than it has in the past, or at least the most recent past, and they have less room to maneuver than in the past because, well, the threat of this country invading other countries is very real, as is evidenced by the fact that we did invade Venezuela. So, obviously, thoughts and prayers, heart goes out. Let's do whatever we can to support Cuba. Again, one of many reasons why we need to get this guy behind two thumbs elected so that at least one voice at the federal level is trying to wring these people's necks saying, why the fuck are we terrorizing this country? It's no longer the Cold War. Communism is not the boogeyman, and you guys are all protecting pedophiles to murder communists. What the fuck? All right, here we go, I guess, speaking of.
President Trump, meanwhile, is threatening to block the opening of a bridge connecting Detroit and Canada, quote, until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them. The Gordie Howe International Bridge has been under construction since 2018 and would be a third route connecting Michigan and Canada, including another bridge and a tunnel. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer defended the president's stance on this earlier today.
They didn't necessarily use American content in a bridge that's going into the United States. There's a question as to the proceeds of tolls, et cetera, and so there's going to be a negotiation on that front into how that bridge should be treated. If it's going to be going into the U.S., which is the main economy, right? We have a $29 trillion economy. The Canadian economy is, between $1 and $2 trillion. The United States needs to make sure that it has its fair share of any proceeds from that bridge.
CBS News White House reporter Olivia Ronaldo.
That is literally such a capitalist scumbag thing to say. We are a bigger, wealthier company than you, and therefore, whatever we agree to do, we should get the lion's share because we are bigger than you. Yeah. Like, are you fucking serious? Not that that's even a valid argument, because Canada would get whatever toll proceeds Canada sets at their end of the bridge, and we would get whatever toll proceeds we set at our end of the bridge. What's there to fucking negotiate? For one. For two, this is yet another attempt to strong-arm another country that is unwilling to bend the knee to der Führer, Donald Trump. Absolutely asinine.
He joins us now. What is the president trying to get from Canada, and how could he potentially stop the opening of this bridge?
And that's the question. What's the rub? What is the Führer in chief really trying to accomplish with this?
Well, it's a good question. Caroline was just asked about this just now in the briefing. She said the president was clear that Canada will control what crosses the bridge, and the White House finds that unacceptable. Caroline also confirmed that the president and Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada spoke about this earlier today. Carney, in his statement, said the situation will be settled. This is a bridge that goes between Detroit and Ontario, and as you mentioned, one of several transportation ways between the two countries, between the U.S. and Canada. And it's mostly owned by Canada, although there's some joint ownership with Michigan there. And this could really impact those auto parts and steel that cross between the U.S.-Canadian border. And as we've mentioned and as we've talked about this, the U.S. relationship with with Canada has become pretty fraught recently. It's gone back and forth where the president likes Mark Carney, but they struggle on these issues of trade. Just in January, the president also...
That's because Trump doesn't actually understand what international trade is. And Trump is a bad businessman to begin with, whose actual theology or ideology in business dealings is to screw over the other guy as much as possible, otherwise it's not considered a win. So basically, Trump thinks he's the Godfather, head of a fucking cartel or a mafia crime family, and is trying to extort everyone that he works with. You can't. That's not how international trade works. It just isn't. It never has been. It never will be. Granted, you can threaten military force, but then we're not talking about trade, right? Because then it's war. So Trump doesn't even understand the fundamentals of international trade. He also thinks he's talking to another CEO or boardroom or whatever else. I don't think the man actually understands that he's president of a country. He thinks he's president of a company, and that company is called the United States of America. I am convinced that he isn't even aware that his actions have consequences for countries, not just his business dealings. And if he is aware, and he is still doing this for his own personal vindictive nature, then that is all the more grounds for invoking the 25th. Like, that's the least, like, him not understanding international trade and being a bastard about it is, that has to be some sort of cognitive disconnect that can be invoked under the 25th, right? Like, bare minimum. And the stupidest in history. I mean,
threatened a 100% tariff on Canada, which has been something that has, really galvanized a lot of issues in that trade relationship. Certainly something to watch very closely. But as you heard Jameson Greer say in that soundbite there, the issue is really the tolls and the payment, really looking to settle the score on who is going to be able to receive some of the tolls from the mass amounts of freight that go over that bridge due to the steel and auto.
Well, they just said that Canada owns the existing two, and because they built it. So, if Canada built it, and Canada controls it, why the fuck does America have any skin in the game at all? If anything, we're winning. We're winning by default. They built the bridge. It is going to improve trade for our country by default, and we didn't have to lift a finger to do it or pay a single dime? Hello? That's victory. That is a trade negotiation in our favor. And honestly, how much do tolls even raise? Let's look at that. Okay. The fuck? Okay, so these are the rates. which is fine, I guess. And there's different programs, but none of this is a comprehensive how much revenue is generated. Really? Okay. How much traffic do the U.S. and Canadian bridges in Michigan have? Oh. Why am I not able to spell Canada today? Okay, 40,000 daily commuters, 323 million in daily goods. Okay, so with that information, I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet, which I guess you're not seeing in the screen here. So we have 40,000 daily commuters. The average toll that we saw was between $5 and $20 due to whatever it was. But say carrying 323 million. Okay, here we go. Here's some annual numbers. 6 million crossings. Okay, let's try that then. 6 million crossings. 323 million. Right? So the total amount of, I guess, volume, which is not the same as revenues, is a pretty big number. Can we turn this into a number, please? With commas. So hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. Okay, so that's clearly... There's 1 quintillion volume. No, that's not how that works. No, it would have to be more like 323 times 365. That's which amounts to $117 billion of total trade. That's what it... Okay. Sorry, guys. I told you I'm not firing on all cylinders today. Okay. Can I share this? Probably not. Window. Oh, I can. That's fucking hilarious. Nice. So, and I because I'm not doing the full screen. But anywho, 365 days, right? Days, daily volume, and then annual gross volume, right? Hundreds, millions, billions. No, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions. Jesus, I swear I'm gonna be okay today. 117 billion gross volume across just the Michigan bridges. Now, sure, that's some amount of tolls, right? There's the 40,000 daily traffic, and then the $5 for regular people. What did we see? So annual revenue from the bridges alone are considered to be around 60 million, 22 million, something around those lines, right? That's according to the website thing, right? So is that where this number is coming in from? And these are kind of really fast. Yeah, 73 million, right? Across all the borders that are happening, right? So I get that 73 million is a fair amount of money to be concerned with, but it's $73 million with $117 billion worth of trade volume across those bridges, which is a lot. I'm not saying it's not an insignificant number. But even if you tariffed, and that's, let's just say that it was tariffs, right? That there were taxes. If we charged any tariffs on this at all, on this volume, the 117 billion, right? How much of that is coming into the United States and how much is that going out? to Canada, right? Because the volume is presumably that. So at this point, we would be having to divide this by 2 on average. Okay. Right? And then times whatever tariff we add, right? So say it's 15%, say it's 100%, right? And I'm going to go ahead and change these to percentages. Right? Obviously, if it's 100%, it doubles back to the thing. But that's kind of the point. We would be charging ourselves the gross import volume across that bridge and not benefiting from it, because we would be, America would be paying this tariff. So it's literally a lack of understanding on how international trade works, what a tariff even is, and the concept of opening trade routes between nations, let alone regions. I mean, imagine if we invested this kind of time, energy, and effort into building high-speed rail to connect the 2 coasts, which is the reason why we built railroads in the first place. And then, with the advent of the automobile, we got rid of all of our rail systems, and we have been suffering for it ever since. I don't know how many tangents I just went off, but well, some bitch. Why?
Parts that come into the U.S. and then back over to Canada for assembly.
Hold on. What? Okay. Okay. Fixed it. All right. Anyway. I hope that was clear as mud. I hope that made sense to everybody. Because that's batshit. That we're arguing over $73 million for one. And for 2, we had no skin in the game to begin with, and we're demanding compensation. Just the audacity.
Lines for cars in particular. So certainly something to watch closely to see really how this gets.
What the fuck are these headlines? 5. Okay, so remember how yesterday we were talking about the 5 Canadians dead in Mexico? Where's that story? Did you ever end up finding that, Anna?
So certainly something to watch closely to see really how this gets settled and what the relationship between the U.S. and Canada looks like going forward, as the president has shown no hesitation about showing his anger towards Canada and some of the particular trade issues that hang over the U.S. trade relationship with Canada.
There are no trade issues with the United States and Canada, other than ones that Trump is creating because he doesn't understand international trade. We have a trade deficit with Canada. And because of that trade deficit, our gross domestic product is 29 times greater than that of Canada. Because even if there's a trade deficit with Canada and other countries, we are turning that trade deficit into a multiplicative profit by taking their goods and resources and turning them into something more valuable, which is the whole point of trade. You take raw material from this place, transport it here, turn it into something more valuable, and then sell it. Or use it, as the case may be. So you were unable to find that video. Go fucking figure. So it's a headline that they're just not talking about. Amazing. Incredible.
And the Trump administration isn't inviting any Democratic governors to the traditionally bipartisan National Governors Association's meeting at the White House next week. What's going on there?
Well, it's interesting. So we heard that Governor Moore of Maryland and then Governor Polis of Colorado were not invited to the dinner, which is typically a bipartisan dinner that is held. Now, the White House has not really told us as to why they weren't invited, but we had confirmed with both of their teams that they were not invited. So as a result, the Democratic governors, in a show of solidarity, are not going to show up to anything that is happening as part of this National Governors Conference that happens every year. And this is quite important because it's where the White House talks with these states about their key issues that are going on, really increasing relations between the U.S. Government and the federal government and state governments. So quite notable there. But the White House tells us that many Democrats were invited to the dinner at the White House and others were not. These are White House events, and the president reserves the right to invite who he wants.
So not only are we destroying international relations and diplomacy, we're also destroying the very fabric of our own country, which is the United States of America, because of partisanship. This will literally be the dumbest civil war in all of human history. A leader of a country blatantly snubbing various states in their country because their political affiliation differs from his, and because he couldn't force them to capitulate, he's going to throw a tantrum and not invite them to the fancy party. Like, rebellions have historically started for less and been successful, mind you. So, like, if ever there was a plan of action to dismantle the United States of America, undermine all of its institutions, and remove it from the world stage as an influential power, what Trump is doing would pretty much be lockstep in line with that plan. And we are seeing revelations that Trump is not just compromised by Israel, but also Russia. And what has Russia been trying to do since the end of World War II and the end of the Cold War? Destroy America. And what are we seeing? America falling to pieces and being stripped for parts by this regime. Unfucking believable.
Now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is holding a meeting with President Donald Trump in the White House.
President Benjamin Netanyahu, international war criminal with an outstanding ICC warrant for arrest for war crimes and crimes against humanity, came to the United States of America and is sitting in the Oval Office of our nation's capital completely unbothered. Just for context.
Negotiations on Iran's nuclear program are high on the agenda. He's pushing for the talks to be expanded to include Iran's missile program and support for regional groups. Now, earlier, Netanyahu met Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington. Tehran has warned against what it said were Netanyahu's efforts to influence negotiations, calling Israel a saboteur. Now, let's bring in our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. Kimberly, given the backdrop of everything that's happening, these are high-level talks, but somehow the US and Israel is in agreement. These talks need to be expanded, so they do have a common ground there, right?
What common ground? We're going to dismantle Iranian military defense systems so that Israel can continue to massacre the Middle East? That's a non-starter, even if it wasn't against Iran. That's a non-starter for any country. What the fuck?
Well, certainly that is what the Israeli prime minister is pressing for in this meeting. The U.S. president, for his part, has a delicate balance, given the fact that he is balancing the interests of the Israeli ally as well as Arab partners in the region who are looking for a de-escalation. So the U.S. president has been very clear all along that he says that he believes Iran is willing to make a deal, and that the United States has made it very clear that its desire is for these negotiations to include not only limiting or halting Iran's uranium enrichment, but also limiting the ballistic missile program and support for regional proxies. So that is what is being discussed right now. I can tell you that meeting is still ongoing. The Israeli prime minister did enter the White House from a side entrance away from television cameras. And we should also note the very loud protests that have been going on outside the White House.
Well, at least we're mentioning the fact that there are some people out there that are actual patriots and decent human beings that are protesting this motherfucker.
Perimeter for the duration of this meeting thus far. But again, what I can tell you is that the U.S. president is definitely encouraging diplomacy, even as he is using military deterrence as leverage in order to ensure that these negotiations stay on track.
Now, Kimberly, as you just said, there is broad agreement. There is the U.S. president trying to do what he wants, what he can with diplomacy here. But there is a bit of a split between Israel and the U.S. when it comes to the occupied West Bank, when it comes to Gaza, and those are going to be on the table as well. Do we think?
Well, yes, that is going to be discussed as well. And the U.S. president has been very clear that he has a red line when it comes to any sort of annexation of the West Bank, which the recent actions in Israel really are a de facto effort to do just that. But the U.S. president...
Why, like, again, we're talking about Israel and America, two separate countries. Israel is an extremely small country in the Middle East whose only claim to fame is the fact that America is funding its existence and its military, which has then been used to commit genocide in Palestine. Meanwhile, Israel is actually forcing American politicians and leadership to consider Israeli interests in the region. Israel wants the Middle East for itself. Fundamentally, we know that it's not going to stop there. But how is it that Israel has this much international influence, so much political power and influence in the United States of America, that they are on the verge of pushing the president of the United States of America to destroying and imploding diplomatic negotiations with Iran by demanding things that Iran will never, and no country should, ever agree to. And then why are we not invoking, the fact that treason is happening because our country, our elected officials, our federal government is compromised by a foreign agent, a foreign government, a foreign state, and acting upon their behalf? I really don't understand.
President is on record as far back as October of 2025, and he has recently given an interview where he has once again reiterated that this is not something that the United States would support.
Kimberly Halkett there, live for us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much. Now, Phyllis Bennis is a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. She joins us from Washington, D.C. The Iranians, Phyllis, have been very clear that this is simply the Americans doing the Israelis bidding for them. How much of that is actually true, do you think?
You know, there has always been a divergence on this issue. It's very rare for the U.S. and Israel to disagree, but there has been a divergence on the question of Iran's nuclear program. The Israelis from the beginning have claimed that Israel cannot be allowed to have any enrichment, cannot be allowed to have any capacity to build a even civilian nuclear power program. The U.S. position was always Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, which it didn't have and was not building. But right now it's very unclear. President Trump has used the same language as in the past, that that Iran should not be able to have a nuclear weapon. But his staff, his ministers, have all said that Iran should not be allowed to have the capacity, meaning the ability to create nuclear fusion for peaceful civilian purposes. So where that comes down ultimately, we still don't know. It's a very dangerous divide.
It is a very dangerous divide, but there is almost a simple, quite elegant solution to all of this, which is going back to the basis of the deal in 2014, the so-called JCPOA. And the deal's already there. It just needs to be signed. But that's not good enough for Israel, and it's certainly not good enough for Donald Trump, I think because it was a deal negotiated by Obama, and that simply is the reason. I mean, is it as simple as that?
I mean, honestly, a lot of our issues and the trade negotiations and the international relationships that are being destroyed left, right, and center are literally because Biden or Obama orchestrated them, which is batshit insane. That is not the point of A, the Constitution, or B, term limits, or C, electing a new president every 4 to 8 years outright. The point of the president is to govern and administer the country, not have a vendetta against previous administrations and vindictively undermine the things that they accomplished. It's to do what you said you were going to do during your campaign. And I don't understand how people, well, no, I guess, undermining Obama and the Democrats was what he promised to do in the campaign. So, you know what, I guess I should shut up because apparently being a vindictive piece of garbage and a child that doesn't understand anything about governing or trade or diplomatic and international relationships is doing exactly what he promised he was going to do.
It is. Actually, if one is rational, it's as simple as that. The problem is this isn't a rational administration. It's not rational decision-making to be debating about how to declare peace while going to war. It isn't rational to be saying, we're going to decapitate the government militarily in Venezuela as proof that I should get the Nobel Prize. None of this is rational. It is perfectly rational.
It is not rational, which is a sign of cognitive decline, which should be grounds for invoking the 25th, which should be an easier threshold to reach than impeachment.
You're absolutely right, Imran, to say that the point here is there was an agreement that was signed in 2015, not only by the United States and Iran, but it was the United States, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council of the UN, as well as Germany, as well as the European Union. So a lot of the world was signing on to this. And in 2018, President Trump walked away from it, said it's not good enough. He didn't even try to claim that Iran was not abiding by it. They were, and everybody agreed with that. His position was, it's not good enough. I can get a better deal. I am the master of deal making. Instead, what we got was escalation from the U.S., military threats. Iran may be continuing its enrichment. So it remains very, very dangerous.
I mean, Phyllis, it does remain dangerous, and you make that point.
I think that pretty much covers that.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has called for unity and apologized for the shortcomings that exist after the recent crackdown on nationwide anti-government protests. Pezeshkian also insisted that the nation is not seeking nuclear weapons. His comments do come as Iranians mark the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, with millions taking to the streets celebrating. But this year's commemoration comes at one of the most challenging moments in the Islamic Republic's recent history, and just hours before actually a meeting takes place in Washington.
We are not willing to own a nuclear weapon. We cannot allow for our relations with our regional and neighbouring countries to collapse, yet we are faced with a conspiracy from imperial powers. We're using all our strength to reinforce peace and harmony in the region. It is the people of the region only who can solve our own problems. Together with Muslim countries, we can resolve our problems without any intervention by alien Westerners.
And indeed, that
is some strong rhetoric, and I'm here for it.
Meeting will be taking place at the White House. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with US President Donald Trump. He says he may actually send a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East if talks with Iran fail. Netanyahu is expected to urge Trump to push for a deal that would also curb Iran's missile program and support for regional groups. Meanwhile, mediation efforts are continuing. Iranian officials have met the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, a day after visiting Oman to ease tension with the US. Qatar's leader has also spoken to Donald Trump on the phone. The two leaders discussing efforts for regional de-escalation and stability. Well, Osama bin Javed is standing by in Doha, but first let's get to Rasul Sadar, who is in Tehran. Rasul, give us a sense how this speech by Pezeshkian went down with the crowds.
So, I get that this isn't as sexy as, you know, Israel or the Ukrainian situation, or Venezuela for that matter. I get that. But if things devolve with Iran and we are at war with Iran by the end of the month or into the next month, like, that's a big fucking deal. That makes the global war on terror seem like peanuts in comparison, okay? Attacking Iran is the Rubicon for the Middle East, right? That is the Rubicon. We attacked Iraq, we attacked Afghanistan, and the Middle East basically said, all right, we will allow this as long as you stay the fuck away from the rest of us. And Iran's like, if you come near me, I have allies in the region and we will come for you. And the fact of the matter is, Iran is not a small country. It is not a weak country. It's 80 million population with a military that's proportionate. And then the UAE is supporting them. Qatar is supporting them. Of course, Iraq and Afghanistan, right? All of these countries are supporting Iran. On top of the fact that America is the aggressor, and on top of the fact it's at the behest of Israel. Like, Israel is orchestrating this conflict between the United States and Iran. Instead of Israel being the proxy in these conflicts between Libya, Syria, and so on and so forth, Israel, who already attacked Iran and got the shit kicked out of them, is engaging in coercion to force the United States to act on Israel's behalf with regards to Iran. Like, this cannot happen. This cannot happen. And if it does happen, it is going to detrimentally impact the region and international relations for an extremely long time, if it's even possible to repair. And it's going to cause diplomatic dissolution across a wide swath of areas, right? If conflict with Iran happens with the United States, China and Russia are not going to just stand by. India is not going to just stand by. The United Nations aren't going to stand by. NATO is not going to stand by. The EU is not going to stand by, right? There are certain things that are not to be done. And attacking Iran is one of them. So I cannot stress enough, is what I'm getting at.
Well, indeed, it was welcomed by many of Iranians here. However, this is not a new stance when we look at the President Pezeshkian's posture toward the protests and also the problems that the country is facing. Since the beginning of the protest on, he has been acknowledging that the country has some shortcomings, particularly regarding the economic hardships that people are facing. He was again and again repeatedly saying that the government is open to the dialogue and to listen to the demands of the people. However, he's also saying that is in line with the establishment here, saying that many of the protesters were deceived by the external powers, by the Zionist regime, he means Israel, and also by Americans. He also believes that there was an international plot against Iran to destabilize the country. But when you look at...
Well, it's not a plot. It was very clear. It was... Wasn't Israel and America not 2 weeks ago openly bragging about arming protesters and causing discord? Did we not cover that in stream? That we were actively engaged in sabotaging these protests and escalating them further? Like, we were literally talking about that. It's not a plot. It is actual fact. And it was happening in plain sight.
The establishment here, particularly the security apparatuses and the judiciary officials, they have been quite clear and promising a firm and a harsh punishment for those who have been involved in the protest, and particularly those who have been using the violence against the security forces. So in that sense, we see a kind of nuance between the approaches of the government and the other representatives of the establishment here. But on the other hand, he has been quite clear when it comes to the country's nuclear program and also the country's relations with the regional countries. He thanked many of the leaders and officials of the regional country, once again reiterating Iran's position that the country is not seeking for the nuclear weapons. But here, one thing is quite clear. As there is a huge potential of a war, the establishment here is trying to show the world that millions are still supporting the establishment.
Osama, and of course
which is something that the West failed to achieve, right? Most Iranians still support their government because they realize that at the end of the day, it's them versus America at the behest of Israel. So at the end of the day, Iranians, and I think a lot of countries across the globe, are beginning to realize, like, America is an unchained wild beast, and the European Union has been either holding that in check or has been waiting for their own opportunity to strike. And they're starting to realize, too, that, you know what, all of these Western powers have been doing nothing but sow discord throughout every region that's been considered underdeveloped for the past century, and are beginning to now form their own coalitions and their own trade agreements and their own alliances to counteract the dominance of Western imperialism. So I think that's worth mentioning that. And then, of course, the second armada being threatened to Iran, which is, again, I really hope that it somehow stops short of conflict and war, but considering Sir Stronghand, huh? Okay. Welcome to the stream. Considering the last time Trump positioned military resources off the coast of a region, of a country, he did in fact use it to invade. The Zapatistas. That sounds extremely familiar, and I just cannot place it right now. Zapatistas. Of National Liberation for Mexico. Okay. Has been nominally at war with the Mexican state, which is a frozen conflict. Rural indigenous people, but it includes some supporters in urban areas internationally. Has been characterized as libertarian socialist or Marxist and having roots in liberation theology, although have rejected political classification. Aligns itself with the wider alter globalization and anti-neoliberal social movement seeking indigenous control over local resources, especially land. Since their 1994 uprising was countered by the Mexican Armed Forces, the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, or the Ejército Zapatista de la Liberación Nacional, EZLN, has abstained from military offensives and adopted a new strategy that attempts to garner Mexican international support. They're also considered decentralized. Okay. Okay. Trying to figure out how to vote this year. Found Ronan and figured this is a good litmus test. I mean, that's a good question. We discussed them a while ago. Gotcha. On principle, it sounds like they are just as they said, a liberation movement that is trying to empower indigenous peoples to reclaim their lands, right? And have more ownership over governance and, of course, the curation of that land. And as far as that goes, I'm here for it. Again, the Zapatistas, in my opinion, are just like the Puerto Ricans who, on either side, whether they're arguing for their own sovereignty and to be removed from the United States as a territory, or becoming a state and then having their own self-governance with, you know, an actual governor, 2 senators, and a congressman, and a National Guard, right? Here's my take. And you might not like it, you might like it. And it may be I passed your litmus test or I don't. I think any organization that is led by indigenous movements, right, by indigenous groups, should be taken seriously and should be given due consideration, right? Land back movements are a great thing. I want to grant statehood to the top 10 or the top 11 indigenous populations in the United States, because there's only 11 that meet the minimum threshold for statehood as it is outlined in the Constitution. If other tribes meet that same threshold, then they should be able to get statehood as well. And again, my argument for granting these places statehood rather than their own sovereign status is they then get a direct voice in the very country that has been subjugating them for centuries, as the case may be, right? 2 senators, 1 congressman, 1 governor, 1 National Guard, right? Those things make a significant difference than just having an organization that gets to be at the table but has no genuine influence, right? If we created states out of Puerto Rico, the 11 most populous indigenous tribes that are eligible for statehood, and DC, that's 13 states. That is 26 senators. That is an increase of the U.S. Senate by 26%. Which would then presumably create an entire block of senators that would have to be recognized, would have to be taken seriously for any legislation to pass, which gives them unprecedented power and influence in the government that they have otherwise had zero influence over. So for me, the Zapatista movement is the same thing. And ideally, Mexico would give them a bona fide seat in the Mexican government where their vote and their voice matters, because they are trying to represent the indigenous populations of Mexico. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but it is my answer. So, and what Anna just said. All right.
More than 25 ambassadors gathered outside the UN Security Council with a unified message of condemnation after Israel announced it would unlawfully expand its control over the occupied West Bank and make it easier for settlers to illegally seize land.
We condemn that position.
These are all human rights violations, and the fact that there's only 26 ambassadors that are standing in solidarity is despicable, right? And again, Israel is just constantly getting away with committing crimes against humanity with impunity, because the Epstein files have every single government's leadership in them. Like, we need some massive arrests and revelations and like expulsions of Israeli think tanks and lobbyist groups that are literally infiltrating and dominating all of these Western governments. Like, Israel is a plague. And I'm trying to not use words that are constantly used for anti-Semitic purposes. But unfortunately, Zionism is a plague. It is an infestation. And it has nothing to do with people of the Jewish faith. Zionism is more closely akin to Nazism, right? Zionists are much closer in ideology to Nazis than any other ideology on the planet. And they are infecting every single Western government on Earth, as is being revealed as those countries, Western countries, are at least taking some action against the perpetrators listed in the Epstein files. Holy shit, Sir Stronghand, I love to hear it. Honestly, you're the first person that has made it on the stream that has heard about me from local politics and then asked me directly. That is incredible. This is what you are doing today, whether you supported me or not, is exactly what we have been trying to do for months now. So thank you. I'm glad that it is finally working the way we intended. Please spread that message with anyone that you can or that you're willing to, because that is why we stream. We stream so you can see the real side of Samuel Ronan, not just the politician shaking hands, kissing babies, and giving speeches, right? I'm good at doing that. I'm good at the public speaking part. And I am very knowledgeable in policy and in public forums where, you know, I would be debating or being interviewed. I am a politician, but I'm also a human being who reacts to things that are happening in the world like a human being should, with disgust and outrage, right? So, please, first of all, thank you for finding the channel. I don't know how you found the channel because, oh no, because we advertise it from the main page. Okay, so thank you. And I appreciate you being on here. Please like, share, and subscribe. Okay.
And we also mobilizing here at the United Nations all components of the UN, beginning with the Security Council, for the immediate reversal of this illegal position of the Israeli government.
Now, here's the thing. It's not like the United Nations hasn't voted all but unanimously to condemn Israel for its actions in the past, only for it to be sabotaged at the 11th hour by the United States. So, what can the United Nations do to circumvent the United States? Because until or unless that happens, or unless countries agree to do something outside of the purview of the United Nations demanding it or authorizing it, America will literally sabotage any effort. And I'm not saying that to say that the ambassadors shouldn't be saying what they're saying, because they should. But what I am saying is that any activities that are generated from these measures are going to be sabotaged by the United States. So what else can these countries be doing and or should be doing? Because again, as an individual nation, they can act independent of whatever the United Nations says, right? Germany could sanction Israel because Germany wants to sanction Israel. Has nothing to do with the United Nations, right? Chile could sanction Israel without having a single thing to do with the United Nations. Granted, the United Nations there is to facilitate and to do things and to have like a consensus, but if that consensus is undermined by the very criminal element that is committing the acts or aiding and abetting in them, then what's the fucking point of having the United Nations? So I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make.
The Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation have signed a letter being circulated at the UN calling for, among other things, an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council on the matter. Talks are underway for when that meeting might happen. Syria's ambassador, speaking on behalf of his role as president of the Arab League at the UN, said they need to stand behind Palestine.
The group affirms that these illegal measures in the occupied West Bank are null and void, and they constitute a clear violation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions, in particular Resolution 2334, which condemns all Israeli measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, and status of the occupied Palestinian territory since 1967.
Benjamin Netanyahu is due to meet with President Donald Trump in Washington on Wednesday.
Which they did, and Israel is trying to force the hand of the American government to act on their behalf, which is treason. Any American leader who acts on the behalf of a foreign power is committing treason. That is in the Constitution. I believe we actually saved it up here, but... Oh, there it is. Treason against the United States, Article 3, Section 3, Clause 1. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. right? So, in adhering to their enemies, Israel is an ally that is acting like an adversary on their own volition against our diplomatic experiences in the region, right? So, to be fair, the technical language is adhering to their enemies. But given that Israel is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, which is criminal acts, and we are adhering to that, it could be loosely construed that enemy is also criminal active, like criminal element or rogue state, right? Just because we aren't at war with a country doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't our enemy or adversarial or some way that could be construed to meet the language of this clause right here. So, speaking of Israel committing crimes against humanity.
Israel has approved the forced expulsion of 2 Palestinians to Gaza who had been imprisoned in Israel. The pair have been stripped of their residency in Jerusalem. Israeli media are reporting the 2 individuals will be sent to Gaza once their sentences are complete. It is the first implementation of a law that was passed in 2023, allowing the revocation of citizenship and the expulsion of anyone convicted of attacking Israelis. So let's bring in Hassan Jabrin. He's here on set. He's the Director General.
So they passed this law in 2023. I'm going to assume after Israel orchestrated their own attack on October 7th, that strips Palestinians of their citizenship and therefore their rights for attacking Israelis. Meanwhile, Israelis are assaulting Palestinians in their homes, on their ancestral lands, and taking it by force with zero consequences. So it is literally legalizing and codifying into law colonization, which doesn't make it moral or ethical or even legal internationally or locally. Because again, Israel is the entity that is occupying the sovereign state of Palestine. Just because Palestine lost doesn't change the fact that Israel is occupying it. Switch user, welcome to the stream. We're getting a lot of follows today. That's interesting. I wonder what we're doing right.
General of Adalah, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel. Welcome, Hassan.
Hi there.
So, as I say, this is the first implementation of the law, which was approved back in 2023. First up, what's your reaction to this development?
Yeah, first of all, we have to distinguish between Palestinians who live under occupation and Palestinian citizens. This law applies to Palestinian citizens who constitute 20% of Israeli population, meaning we are speaking about Israelis that they have Palestinian nationality. This is the first time.
Okay. So Israel is occupying the West Bank and trying to colonize it, has already glassed the Gaza Strip, and 20% of the population of Israel are also Palestinians. And this law applies to those Palestinians, not the ones in the West Bank and not the ones that were just murdered and ethnically cleansed. How do the Palestinians that are considered Israelis reconcile the fact that their fellow Palestinians are literally being displaced in the West Bank and are being ethnically cleansed in the Gaza Strip? I am so fucking confused. The more I learn about Israel and their occupation of Palestinian territory, the more confused and disgusted I become.
This law apply to them. That's the first time that their citizenship are revoked. And we know that the law said that it's easy to revoke, the new law, easy to revoke your citizen only if you committed terror act, meaning if you attack person physically. This will be very, very hard precedent against Palestinian citizens. It will open the way to start to transfer them based on political reason.
Okay, so no. This is going back to Nazi Germany, before the Jewish population of Germany were stripped of their human, civil, and, citizenship rights. Got it. Perfect. Outstanding. Clarified.
To know, Nick, that this law, although the law has a neutral language, doesn't say that it's against Palestinian citizen or Jewish citizen, but will apply only to Palestinian citizen because it has discretion for the state to use it, and they will use it only against Palestinian citizens.
So it's a blanket law to target any demographic that they choose when they feel that the law has been invoked. Interesting, because isn't that what the UK did to crush pro-Palestinian groups? And isn't that what the United States is doing against protesters in fucking Minneapolis, trying to charge them with terrorism and threatening the fact that they are armed against armed agents and therefore that are acting as insurgents and domestic terrorist groups? So, it's almost as if everything keeps coming full circle with these atrocities, and that these countries keep circle jerking each other to subjugate their populations, to ostracize dissenting groups, and to charge them with terrorism and strip them of their rights. Outstanding. Brought to you by the global war on terror, which ushered in these legislative pieces to be normalized across the globe.
And it bears repeating, doesn't it? This represents 20% of the Israeli population.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the first law that we know in any Western democracy that allow the state to revoke the citizenship of its citizen only just for political reason. If one person attempt to attack physically.
I mean, at what point do you stop calling a democratic nation a democratic nation if they have laws on the books that allow you to strip the citizenship of citizens because they do something that you don't like? Because by that definition alone, being able to charge citizens with terrorism or stripping them of their citizenship or threatening to do so, that would make most of Europe, America, and Israel no longer democratic nations. So why the hell are we repeating or even suggesting that they are?
A person for a political reason. So this is why it's very, very dangerous law. It will open the way. As Netanyahu said, this is just the beginning. That means that they are going to revoke more and more citizenship of citizens, and this is way of transfer the Palestinian citizen.
Right, and it comes at a time that we're seeing this intensifying displacement of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank too, right?
This is like part of the war against the Palestinian. Palestinian in Gaza under genocide, Palestinian in West Bank, they are facing the violence of the settlers, violence of the army, and now Palestinian citizens, they are facing the threat of revoking their citizenship. Now, also we have to add another local Israeli component, because this year is election year. In order to...
And again, Netanyahu has been in and out of criminal court, of Israel's criminal court, mind you, for the past 12 months for corruption, and has constantly left the proceedings for corruption to go to other places to commit more crimes and corruption. So these elections, I don't even know that we can call them elections either. God damn.
To create tension between the Palestinian citizen and the state, the Israeli government start to take those acts. Those acts are good for the right wing. The right wing show that we are attacking Palestinians. They do that for populist reasons. They are doing that for electoral reason, because the election show, or all the surveys shows that the Palestinian citizens, they are going to be a decisive factor. They are going to decide who will be in the government, because if they will vote, and they will vote, and all the surveys show that they will have high rate of voting, and they will reach 15 seats, this government won't be the same government.
Okay, but if Palestinians had the electoral power to determine Israel's actions at all, why haven't they done it for the past 80 years of the occupation? So I don't buy that. Secondly, and more importantly, if Palestinians vote in this election in extremely high numbers against Netanyahu, and Netanyahu loses in whatever other administration comes into power, Netanyahu's not going to give up power. He is going to declare the election rigged and false, and then strip those Palestinians of their rights, and then retroactively, or before the election comes, strip them of their rights retroactively to ensure that he can't lose power. At this point, he has nothing to lose and everything to gain. Because if he does lose power, he knows he's going to be executed at the United Nations, right? So the only choice he has is to stay in power, to continue to blackmail Trump, his regime, and Western powers. Because if he loses control of that influence, he's a dead man, and he knows it. But he has the tools in place to strip Palestinians of what remaining humanity they have left. And he is this close to using the nuclear option. Okay. And other horrible news.
Satellite images appearing to show a large training facility in Ethiopia reportedly used by Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces. The images released by the Reuters news agency show a camp roughly 30 kilometers from the Sudanese border, carved out of a forested area in western Ethiopia's Benishangul Gumuz region. The news agency says construction activity began early last year and intensified in October. Images show hundreds of tents, heavy vehicles, and newly cleared ground. Reuters cites Ethiopian officials, diplomats, and security sources who say the camp is being used to train RSF fighters who have been battling Sudan's army since April 2023. Nearly 3 years of fighting.
So Ethiopia is building rebel training camps to fight the Sudanese government, both sides of which, the rebels and the Sudanese government, are committing atrocities against the Sudanese people. Both sides are raping, plundering, and pillaging villages and cities and people. Both sides. Both sides are committing heinous atrocities. And Ethiopia is apparently trading one half of that.
Fighting has pushed Sudan into what the United Nations describes as the world's worst humanitarian and displacement crisis, forcing millions from their homes. While Reuters says it cannot independently verify who is being trained at the site or where they are deployed, analysts say the images leave no doubt.
This report is some of the most damning evidence that we've seen publicly, and proof that Ethiopia is now involved in supporting and hosting rapid support forces bases that is supported and built by the United Arab Emirates.
Reuters also reports satellite images show new construction at Asosa Airport, around 50 kilometers from the camp, including what experts identify as sites consistent with.
So, what? Is the Middle East now embroiling itself in African affairs? Is that what we're seeing? I mean, may as well, right? Western powers have been meddling in the southern hemisphere. The Middle East may as well get involved too, because apparently the Middle East isn't fucked up enough that they can just focus on their own problems. No, they got to stir up shit in Africa as well. Like, the world is literally tearing apart at the seams. And that's not Trump's fault. That's just the world right now. Fascism is on the rise. Terrorism is on the rise. just conflicts are rising up all over the place, right? Military engagements between countries that have nothing to do with Europe or America are still happening all over the place, right? And this is just one of them. I don't know what full moon has been shining upon Earth lately, but it is stirring a hornet's nest of sociopathy. And I don't know, short of getting elected into office and having the authority to do something about it, I really don't know what we as citizens can do other than organize, protest, and general strike until this regime collapses, and then we can do something about it. But we have to do the unsexy thing of organizing and generally striking in order to do that, or voting for people who are primarying incumbents, which is what I'm doing and what I recommend happens everywhere across the country. Okay, Bangladesh.
Bangladesh is voting again, but this election is not only about choosing a government. It is also about whether years of anger, protest, and sacrifice can finally be translated into dignity, accountability, and equal citizenship. I am Maudud Ahmed Sujon, a journalist based in Dhaka and between us. After covering multiple elections in Bangladesh, this one feels less like a finish line and more like an uncertain beginning. This election, alongside a referendum linked to a proposed state reforms, comes in the aftermath of the July 2024 uprising.
That kind of atrocities and crimes against humanity I saw in front of my own eyes. I don't think I will be able to get over it in my whole lifetime.
That uprising followed years of shrinking political space, disputed elections, and allegations of enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. During the July 2024 uprising, I was reporting from the newsroom, managing coverage of protests.
Which, I don't know if we were streaming at the time. I think we were. But, yeah, the Bangladeshi Gen Z student uprising is what they're talking about. And, of course, they're framing it as something else now. But it was the students that led this protest, that led the not quite the overthrow of the government, but definitely bringing it to its knees to address the corruption and the other complaints that they had. And there has been volatility in Bangladesh and in the greater region ever since. So that's kind of the backdrop here.
Crackdowns, bloodshed, and deaths, often while the internet was shut down. Information arrived in fragments. Verification was difficult. Emotions were raw. I spoke to families who had lost sons and daughters. One teenager I interviewed had lost an arm during the protests. He told me he was willing to endure further sacrifice if it meant a better Bangladesh. One moment from that period stays with me. Groups of students protesters marched repeatedly in front of our media compound. Their anger wasn't directed only at the state, it was directed at the media too.
It's almost as if what I just said is the point, right? Fascism and authoritarian governments, a complicit media within those countries, and the outrage of the people meeting their boiling points, meeting their critical mass, and that boiling into the streets in civil unrest. And not peaceful protest as is usually, encouraged, but major rioting. And honestly, this is what's happening across the globe, right? Even here in America, we accuse the media of being bootlickers because they are. Every time we play something from CBS, NBC, CNN, any of these news networks, they are literally regurgitating the talking points of the Trump regime. And we call it out every single step of the way. And even Al Jazeera is struggling to be objective in their reporting as much as we would like them to remain objective. And so when you have that happening at such a critical mass that it's affecting a much larger portion of the population that then takes action, This is the result. And apparently, America hasn't reached that critical mass, which is insane because it is clearly evident across every element of our government and our institutions, right? The media is complicit. The government is compromised. The Epstein files have resulted in precisely zero consequences or accountability, right? We are instigating conflicts across the globe, and our commander-in-chief is likely suffering from dementia and senility at best, right? And what's happening is, instead of people, Americans, being outraged in concert, we constantly get bombarded with cultural divide, social divide, and even economic divide, to where we lose focus on the bigger picture because we are being told to, hate the Super Bowl halftime show, or, you know, point fingers at MAGA, or point fingers at black people, or point fingers at immigrants, or, hey, this bad shit is happening in Minnesota, but we're going to go ahead and pull the bad guy out, and now it's not in the news anymore, right? Meanwhile, what's happening in Minnesota has only continued to escalate, right? And if that's not enough, we're going to have this atrocity. And if that's not enough, we're going to commit more crimes over here. We're constantly bombarded with chaos to keep us spinning in circles rather than focusing on one thing and chomping down on the bit. And I'm shocked that it wasn't the Epstein files, because that seemed like it for the time, for a very long time there, for 2 months in the shutdown of Mike Johnson refusing to do anything with the Epstein files. And then we had the shutdown. The Epstein files stayed in the news, and it stayed in people's hearts and minds. And that was something that we focused on. And now that they're being revealed, we're just not doing anything about it. So, I don't know what else to say on that.
That moment exposed how deeply trust in institutions had collapsed. I have covered elections before under Sheikh Hasina's government. In 2018, I visited polling centers heavily guarded by police, but with almost no voters inside. Polling officials were afraid to speak to journalists. At one polling station, my colleague, a photojournalist, was forced to delete images showing the empty voting center. Television crews attempted to portray the day as festive, but on the ground, it felt choreographed. This time feels different, not because fear has disappeared, but because participation has returned. Despite concerns about violence, many voters described this election as a civic moment. Recently, a 55-year-old auto rickshaw driver in Dhaka told me he plans to return to his village to vote, something he hasn't done since 2008. That decision isn't about loyalty to a party, it's about reclaiming a right. When I speak to voters...
And there we go. It's about reclaiming a right. Voting is only as useful as the amount of people who use that right to vote, right? If 100% of the voting age population that can vote does vote, you have a fully engaged democracy and a fully engaged society, which will also then hold whatever they just voted for accountable to what they voted for, right? It might cause more divide, especially if there's only two parties to pick from, which is, I think, one of our biggest concerns, because if 100% of Americans were to vote, but the choices were still red or blue, if red happens to win, half the country that just bothered to vote is gonna be pissed. And that's either going to result in actual compromise happening, an actual policy across party divides being formed, or it's going to cause a divide and more conflict than what we are seeing today, which we've already had in this country. So I think one of the biggest problems with American politics is that we only have two parties. Now, if we got rid of the party system and just had open electoral processes, that still might be an issue, because if there's nothing to bind people together, are they going to work together? Or is there going to be different ideological things that come around from it? I don't know. We don't have any examples of that to point at in the world, because political parties exist in every country that has at least the appearance of a democracy. So what I'm getting at is Bangladesh is reclaiming its civil liberties, the right to vote, and the desire to vote and to make an impact in their own government and in their own lives, right? And in America and in a lot of Western countries, that has gone out the window. People just don't seem to care. There's apathy. Oh, our vote doesn't matter anyway, because for decades we have been bombarded with your vote doesn't matter. Vote for the lesser of two evils. Vote for the greater good because you don't have a choice. It's better to have something than nothing at all. So, that is why we are in the state that we are. Okay. Christ.
At least 10 people, including a suspected gunman, are dead after a shooting in Canada's British Columbia.
So, Canada has had its first school shooting in God knows how long, I'm sure they're going to say, and it makes international news, which is exactly how egregious and awful a school shooting should be, and how rare they should be. That if it happens at all, it makes international news, because Al Jazeera is considered international. But it happens literally every week, sometimes multiple times a week in the United States of America. So, we need to do something about that. But this isn't about America, it's about Canada.
The incident took place at Tumbler Ridge. 6 people were found dead at a high school while another died on the way to the hospital. 2 more bodies were also located at a residence which people believe is linked. Authorities say the suspect was found dead inside the school with a self-inflicted injury.
Our communities are tight-knit. We're spread out across the northern part of the province, but we are a close community-oriented group of BC citizens. We have multiple layers of support coming for our students, for our teachers, for our community of Tumbler Ridge, for our front line and front first responders that were part of this unfolding event and are going to be working through that in the days and years to come. I've had an opportunity to speak with the mayor. I've had an opportunity to speak with politicians. Your businesses are stepping up to provide support as best as they can. And I think that really speaks to the fiber of the North District and the northern part of British Columbia and exactly what it will take to get through this together.
Don't miss out. Get the full...
Really? That's all Canada has had its first school shooting in years, decades maybe. Maybe I'm too much of an American. Like, I want to know who the gunman was, what was the motivation, why, how did it even get to this point, right? You know, where was the police? What was the response? I mean, is that heartwarming that the community and the governments are coming together to deal with this crisis, because it is a crisis and it is a tragedy and it is traumatic, and that Canada has had to not deal with this for so long that it is actually traumatic to first responders and law enforcement instead of another fucking Tuesday? Yes, that's all notable, but like, this is a huge story, and you guys couldn't even give it more than a minute and 20 seconds? Okay.
This child's too young to understand that his feelings of constant pain and exhaustion are a consequence.
Okay, alright, come on. You're gonna open this video with making us, like, literally want to rip our souls out and stomp them on the ground watching this child suffer from hunger?
Of South Sudan's escalating armed conflict. The UN says around 280,000 people have been forced from their homes in Jonglei state, worsening a decades-old crisis of hunger. 2-year-old Deng and his mother, Aho Deng, say they were lucky to escape the fighting and make it to this hospital in the town of Bor.
Just we went in the bush. We stayed for 1 week and a half.
At home, she says she kept cattle and sold crops from a small farm. All of that's gone.
This one can take this one milk of cow. When we came here, no milk. Even this one fodder for this one for the market, we are not got because we don't have salary.
The UN Children's Fund, which supports this stabilisation centre, says many of its others have been closed because of fighting and government restrictions on movement, just as nearly 500,000 children are now at risk of needing this kind of help.
When they move from where they're supposed to support their children and they move to places where they cannot afford to get anything, then it becomes a challenge for them to put even food on the table.
And UNICEF is one of those groups that the United States was supposed to be partially funding, and we're not anymore. Just to put that out there.
And that affects them, even mentally and psychologically, it affects them. Even those who are breastfeeding, it becomes a challenge for them to breastfeed.
Some of the people here have had to travel far just to be able to access any health care at all. In many of the places that they come from, there are no longer any operational health facilities. The UN says 11 hospitals and medical facilities have been attacked and looted since the fighting escalated in late December.
Which, I mean, if that sounds familiar to what Israel was doing to Palestine, it should. Except this isn't a one-sided conflict. This is a civil war that has been raging on for about the same amount of time. And it's barely getting any notice whatsoever. This has been on YouTube for over a day, and it's gotten just over 1,000 views. People do not fucking care about what's happening in Africa. People don't fucking care what's happening in Bangladesh, right? People only care what's happening in the Ukraine and in Israel, maybe mostly just the Ukraine, and maybe a little bit of Iran, because that's kind of in the news cycle now. We are only told to care about certain things, and therefore that's all we will care about. While people suffer and atrocities abound all across the globe. Speaking of atrocities all across the globe, we haven't had the BBC on stream yet, so let's go.
Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube, where we go behind the headlines. Hello, I'm Oliver Conway. And today we're looking at global security, a year on from that speech at the Munich conference by the US Vice President J.D. Vance. We're joined by our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale. And James, J.D. Vance really lashed out at Europe that day. Remind us of how that speech went down and what it signalled about the new Trump administration's view of the world.
Basically, J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, sort of landed in, if I can use a rugby metaphor, with both boots, studs on, straight into the Europeans, and essentially launched a strong ideological attack, which was essentially saying, look, you Europeans, you're wrong on freedom of speech. You know, you're suppressing freedom of speech. You're controlling the big tech companies. You are opening your borders too much to uncontrolled migration. And as a result, you are threatening your own cultures. So in other words, his argument...
In other words, the same fucking arguments that Mussolini and Hitler used in World War II. The same arguments that America used prior to the Civil War, and then after the Civil War, and then for the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the Page Act, and I think there was another act afterwards too. And then it was the same rhetoric that was used after World War II, and during World War II, that our culture is under attack, right? And then that sparked the Cold War, communism, attacking American culture and American values, and then the nuclear family and Christian values and family values. So, like, the fact that these authoritarian talking points continue to be reiterated openly, repeatedly, and are now being adopted and more thoroughly integrated by the very same European countries that initially rebuffed them, unless they themselves were already engaging in it, is absolutely insane. And I'm not saying that America influenced European countries to become fascist, because they were doing that on their own anyway. I'm looking at you, UK. But it's still shocking that when push came to shove, every single European country took the side of Israel, cracked down on protesters with extreme prejudice, and labeled as many of them as they could as terrorists for supporting Palestine. So.
Was not the usual one of, look, Europe, can you spend more on your own defence? Can you do a little bit more to be more self-sufficient and less reliant on the United States? It was essentially saying, you guys are governing wrong, you're making the wrong choices, and ultimately you're threatening the civilization from which the United States originally emerged. So it absolutely shocked the people who were at Munich.
A year on, a lot has happened. Take us through some of the most significant moments.
Well, I mean, it has just been non-stop. I mean, and the thing is that there are some things that we think about, we can remember because they're relatively recent. So like this year, we've had the US attack on Venezuela and the removal of the leadership there. We've had Donald Trump's threat of military action against Greenland to take over that. We've now had more discussions and the build-up of US forces off the coast of Iran. So that's just a bit of this year. But if you think about last year, we've had, and obviously this time last year was dominated by President Trump's attack on President Zelensky of Ukraine in the Oval Office and everything that fell from that. You know, the Americans withholding military support and then repairing the relationship, a mineral deal that evolved slowly but surely into talks. So there's been a whole kind of sort of Ukraine strand. Remember the military confrontation between Pakistan and India last May, where, both these are two, suspected nuclear powers lobbing missiles at each other. It was a very serious moment. You've got Trump's trade wars, obviously underlining a lot of that. You've got the developments in Gaza, with the Americans finally and the others forcing an element of some sort of change of the status quo, the acceptance of the first stage in part of a peace negotiation.
Every single country on planet Earth resisted that movement, including and especially the United States of America. It wasn't until the flotilla had actual celebrities on it and it started actually becoming politically expedient to talk about the genocide because of what it actually was no longer being able to be hidden as a genocide, that the news finally had to cover it as what we have been saying it was for the past 2 years, a genocide. So to claim that the Western powers finally came together to do the right thing is false. People finally demanded action, and the news finally had no choice but to admit, yeah, Israel, we can't cover this anymore. We can't pretend that what's happening isn't what's happening. So, and then, and only then, did America and other countries even lift a finger to put a stop to the genocide, which never stopped, by the way, because Israel has killed over 600 people since the ceasefire and has restarted airstrikes and ground assaults on the Gaza Strip, where people are living in tents. There are no standing structures in the Gaza Strip. None. There is not a single structurally sound building in the entire Gaza Strip, because Israel bombed so much of the Gaza Strip that it is all but considered rubble. And Israel continues to use military force against people living in actual rubble. Not even ruins, rubble.
As well as that, more civil war in Sudan at huge cost, in a way that many in the West have sort of ignored. So, there's a sort of constant...
At least he admits it. because we've been saying this too. Granted, we were a little bit slow to the tape as well on the Sudanese civil war, and he just said it. Yeah, the West has largely ignored it, and we're political junkies, and we weren't even aware of it, or at least not covering it as much as we should have.
List of events that has just sort of, it shocked us, it shocked audiences, and, it's taken a lot of policymakers by surprise.
You mentioned that list by J.D. Vance of cultural issues that he wasn't happy about, but the Americans also did want the Europeans to do more for security. Did they have a point there?
Oh, yeah. No, I think they have had a point. And successive American administrations going back a long time. Eisenhower was first talking about this after the war. So this is not a new argument, but I think it was...
My boy Eisenhower telling the Europeans to get their shit together. Go figure.
It was one that was offered by the Americans under Trump too, with greater force and greater power. The thing is, the Europeans have accepted that. They now accept that principle. They have started spending more on defence. Not enough in the view of the Americans, not enough in the view of some members of Europe who think that, there's still some countries, particularly closer to the Mediterranean, that are lagging their feet. But certainly there is an awareness now and a realisation within Europe that things have to change, that they can no longer hide or rely upon the US security umbrella in a way they always have done. That doesn't mean sort of, leaving NATO, chucking, the baby out with the bathwater, but it does mean thinking, how do European...
I mean, that is what they should be thinking, because the United States threatened to invade Greenland, which was a fucking NATO ally. So if Europe isn't considering the possibility that America, that the United States, will leave them high and dry, they're fucking stupid, because this regime might very well fucking do something that can't be undone. Even if I get into office, I might not be unable to do all of the harm that has been caused by this regime. And that's the point. That's the fucking problem. Trump is burning bridges that can't be rebuilt, or are going to take generations to rebuild, right? If I get elected and I purge the entire United States of its corrupt filth, charge, arrest, trials, sentencing, the whole 9 yards, right? International courts invited in to do their thing, right? Even if I do that and then I go onto the world stage and say, hey, look, I cleaned up my mess. Can we be friends again? They're going to be like, well, we trust you, President Ronan. You have 4 years, maybe 8. And then what? The next person after you, we have no idea who that's going to be. You don't know who that's going to be. So how can we trust that the next person that follows your footsteps, your legacy, is going to either expand upon that foundation or completely undermine it like Trump undermined decades, if not centuries, of diplomacy with various countries across the globe? Okay? That's the problem. I will be a good president. The next person might not. The person after them might be a good person. The person after that might be a good person. Leia is going to be a fantastic president when she's ready to go. But there is no guarantee that between me and however many steps until Leia becomes president, that we're going to have altruistic leadership. Well, Sam, why don't you just become a dictator or authoritarian? It's like, well, because I believe in democracy, for one. But for two, that opens up a different can of worms. It still relies upon me, okay? So I normalize relations with the global whatever again, because it's me. Upon my death, that goes out the window. And whoever succeeds me at that point, or if it's a public election again, has to either follow in those footsteps and be trusted to follow in those footsteps, or completely undermines all of that goodwill that I spent a lifetime rebuilding. So even if we took the extreme stance that I became a dictator for good, right? I became the dictator of the people. Upon my death, that trust goes out the window. Now, sure, you would think after however many decades or years of leadership and rebuilding that goodwill and changing a cultural, social ideology, like unbrainwashing an entire country and maybe unbrainwashing an entire, hemisphere, you would think there would be better normalization, right? But I am still just the leader of my country, a very influential country, a very powerful country, but my country nevertheless, right? There's no guarantee that outstanding leadership in the United States will undo the fascism that is happening in Europe and other countries regardless, right? So, no matter, even if I am the best president in all of American history, no offense, Leia, you haven't been president, just saying. But even Leia can't match my level of leadership, right? That doesn't change the fact that it's not going to impact other countries and doesn't necessarily guarantee lasting impact on other countries, right? So, the harm, however, does have lasting impact on other countries because other countries do not have to rely on the United States for anything. And if the United States becomes isolated, we turn into Cuba, but with 330 million people and a large army, that very quickly becomes useless unless we start actually invading and conquering other countries. And at that point, they're going to start dismantling and destroying their own infrastructure like Russia did when Germany invaded in World War II. So, why this tangent? What is happening in the world today has consequences for not just the next couple of years, but for generations. Generations, right? And if the conflicts that exist devolve into open warfare, and I mean no holds barred open warfare, World War III, right? Russia says, fuck it, I'm steamrolling the Ukraine. Ukraine will fall in days. No questions asked. Of course, Europe would have to take some sort of action about that. And now we're in World War III. Okay? America invades Iran. Well, now you've just triggered the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and many other Middle Eastern countries. Probably Russia and China as well. Probably India, if we're being honest. Okay, so there's also World War III. Trump invades another Latin American country or absolutely severs diplomatic relations with Canada and Mexico. That probably leads to World War III as well, right? And if Trump does any of those things, goodbye any alliances with the European Union, right? So that's out the window. And any sort of normalization in Latin America. Because now we are a pariah. Me ousting Trump and his regime and everybody that followed him does not undo that. And me doing good work in my country and trying to heal wounds doesn't change the fact that I have 4 to 8 years, and and everybody's understanding I am limited to 4 or 8 years. That's a long time, but it's also not a long time on the grand scale of a country, right? And 4 or 8 years is probably not enough time to undo the harm of initiating World War III, severing diplomatic relations with Europe, instigating more unrest in the Middle East. It's probably not enough time to fix those things. 4 or 8 years might be enough time to fix the U.S. economy and our crumbling infrastructure and decimated institutions, especially if you do a clean sweep of everybody in power and just arrest them for conspiracy and being in the Epstein files and all this other shit, right? I can probably fix the country in 4 or 8 years, but can I fix the programming, the propaganda that we have been infested with for decades? That's the question. I mean, I'm thinking the answer is no. Or at the very least, it'll be most of that 8th year where that finally starts showing some actual growth. But we've mentioned this before in stream. Although I guess they did walk this back with labeling nurses as professionals. But for the sake of argument, Well, actually, now I need to check. Hold on a second. Let me check. So did the Department of Education? Okay, so, I mean, as of December 3rd, 2025, the classification of professional degree excludes nursing. And it doesn't look like that changed. So... Great. Outstanding. So that brings me back to the example I was going to make, which is nursing. If nursing is no longer considered a professional degree, that means that there are no longer federal subsidies to take nursing programs, and we already have a nursing shortage, right? Now, because of that nursing shortage, and now that it's not considered professional, that means the wages of nurses is going to go down, which means people are going to be less incentivized to become a nurse, which means you're going to have less nurses, compounding the shortage in the first place. On top of that, since it's not going to be held to this standard, it's going to be held to this standard, you're going to have less qualified nurses. So for at least 3 years, we're going to be dealing with that situation of unqualified, unmotivated nurses that are also underpaid. Day one, let's just say I'm able to clean house and restore everything, and I pass a bunch of executive orders and this, that, and the other. Nursing is back to being a professional degree. Great. Day one, we have an influx of thousands of nurses. And let's just say I make it universal health care as well. Like, nursing is now fully covered by the US of A according to the Department of Education. Okay, great. A nursing degree is 4 years. So we've lost professional nurses who were getting trained at the professional level, who were motivated to become nurses because of the professional level, the pay, the benefits, and so on and so forth. We lost that for 3 years. We started over on day one, and it's going to take at least 4 years to get back to the point we were at 7 years ago, right? So day one, 4 years into the future to get back to 7 years in the future, right? That is a 7-year gap. That is going to take my entire first term just to get back to square one. Fixing it and expanding the nursing program won't even take effect until my second term, assuming I have one. That is what I mean when I say that this administration is causing generational harm. Because how many people are going to die in that 7-year period? How many people are going to die that didn't need to die because of understaffing and lack of nursing and qualified nurses? That's the point. Generations are going to be impacted. Generations. And that's just what's happening here at home in the United States of America. Diplomatic relations being severed. Tariffs. Trade agreements going out the window. Conflict with other countries. Occupying other countries. You think we're going to be normal friends with Venezuela just because I become president, pull everybody back, give Maduro back to them and say sorry? No! They are not going to do any business with us forever after that. And the fact that anybody in the world is, after we invaded Venezuela and kidnapped their president and then trafficked them to America to then charge them with some bullshit thing is insane to me. Like, again, Epstein conspiracy, so on and so forth, right? So, tangent aside, there is a lot. This entire tangent brought to you by autism is to highlight the fact that the problems that are occurring across the globe are not going to be fixed by one leader and one generation, one country coming together to fix problems. If we are going to solve these issues, this has to be a global effort, a populist movement across all nations, a true workers of the world unite style thing. Otherwise, it's just some countries regaining their sanity while others continue to devolve into madness and trying to balance the two. That's all I was trying to say.
Countries shore up their own defences, cooperate more amongst themselves to do that.
Of course, it's not just Europe feeling the heat. What about other countries like Canada?
The Canadians have, at the various stages, clashed with the Americans, particularly between Prime Minister Carney, who's obviously a new leader for the Canadians, with Donald Trump. So that has been a fairly up and down relationship. What's been interesting is the way that Carney has begun to sort of carve out a little role for himself, not necessarily as the leader of the sort of anti-Trump crowd, because I think he would dispute that, but he is certainly now saying this is how other countries like Canada, like the UK, like other middle powers can think about doing things slightly differently. Instead of just hanging on every Truth Social that Donald Trump puts out, we need to organise ourselves and we need to cooperate better ourselves so that you can say, let's have an ad hoc, whether you're talking about AI.
Right. Isolating America and insulating themselves from America on the international stage, which will cause the U.S. to collapse or suffer significantly.
Sharing of biotech or military issues or whatever it is, just saying, look, let's have ad hoc relationships, partnerships that form a new kind of way of cooperating that isn't just dependent on, what the United States says.
Talking of truth.
So I think I inadvertently covered a lot of what they were going to say in the next 4 minutes by going on a 20-minute tangent. So we're going to move on to another.
A day of extreme jeopardy for Sir Keir Starmer over the scandal surrounding Peter Mandelson and his links with Jeffrey Epstein is ending tonight with his cabinet rallying round him and his backbench MPs applauding him after he appealed to them for support in an evening meeting in Westminster.
Imagine that. Pedophiles. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess pedophile protectors under fire because pedophiles that they assigned or designated or appointed are being revealed by the Epstein files, and it's only half of the files and none of the videos, and of course heavy redactions. So what few names were actually revealed were done so on purpose, either at the behest of Israel or the incompetence of DOJ. So these aren't even all the names. There are so many names that are still redacted across the globe. But let's continue.
A frantic and roller coaster day for Sir Keir. He faced the sudden resignation of his Director of Communications and a public call on him to stand down by Labour's leader in Scotland, Anna Sarwar. The fallout from the Epstein files has also prompted an unprecedented statement from Buckingham Palace, in which the King makes clear his profound concern at allegations about his brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and his involvement with the late paedophile, and says they stand ready to support a police investigation if they're approached. More on that in a moment, but first here's Chris Mason on a perilous day for the Prime Minister.
Tea time tonight.
Is time running out for you, Prime Minister?
And the question of the day.
Damn, that was cheeky. That's British stiff upper lip right there.
If Keir Starmer had ever wondered what a political near-death experience felt like, he doesn't have to wonder anymore. He was heading to address his MPs and peers in private in Parliament and was greeted very warmly. The Labour Party peered over the cliff edge of a leadership change today and has thought twice about it, for now at least.
Tonight's demonstration of strength, of course with friendly criticism, but demonstration of strength, I hope, will now allow Keir Starmer to be able to...
Isn't the Labour Party supposed to be the left wing, like the left, like the Overton window left of Parliament, or have they become co-opted by the Democrats or the neoliberals of Parliament? Because Like, any real progressive, any real left-winger in America that has any sort of power or authority, if they were working with somebody that was listed in the Epstein files, that person would go out of their way to drag that Epstein file guy in front of a courtroom and be like, nope, arrest this motherfucker. There is no solidarity. We are not going to back the pedophiles. We're just not going to fucking do that. And honestly, you shouldn't have to be left-wing for that to be the case. Honestly, the people who should be the most outraged about the Epstein files should be conservatives. Family values, pro-children, pro-family, right? Right? Here you have a cabal being led by Mossad to literally do the worst things imaginable to children, and instead of holding them accountable, you're going to back them up and support and protect them. Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Dem Saga? Oh, I see. International. Got it. Yeah. Mike Carey is definitely the establishment guy, and he probably is getting, I mean, he is getting heavily funded by Wexner, who we are now, it is being very publicly revealed that he was not just in the Epstein circle, he was the chief executor of Epstein's estate. Like, that's not nobody. That is a number 2 or number 3 position in the hierarchy of this global pedophile ring. And the fact that Wexner's name is on medical centers and a bunch of other shit in downtown Columbus, and that the petitions to remove it failed, is disgusting. Absolutely fucking disgusting. So, thank you for stopping by, and thank you for pointing that out. Honestly, I truly hope that helps undermine Mike Carey's campaign. Even if that support ends up going to Democrats instead of me, as long as it hurts him, I think we win. Because the fact that there are so many powerful, influential, and wealthy people influencing politics and aren't being held accountable is absolutely disturbing. Have you seen the Rooster exposing Wexner a lot? Absolutely disgusting. Yeah, no, I am not familiar with the Rooster, but we've been covering the Epstein files generally, right? And specifically trying to bring it to local where it is local, which Wexner is local to Ohio. So we've been covering that element of it. But I don't think there are specific news reports on Wexner himself, which we might want to spend a little bit of time and energy researching, because ideally, because I'm also actively running for Congress while doing this stream, and although this is the Oval Office, we don't have nearly as much Ohio-focused news, because Ohio-focused news usually isn't insane like, you know, ICE murdering people in the streets of Minneapolis, or detention centers holding 5,000 children in the worst concentration camp circumstances in history in Texas, right? Or invading Venezuela, or, right? So it's just, yeah. Okay. So Anna, the Rooster, that you might want to write that one down. State of Stew might be a good connection for you to make. So on the ball, that X banned him. Not trying to promote him, because I'm not him, but he has a lot of good info you could likely use against Carey. See, that's great news. And we have interns, so we have interns doing Oppo research on Carey. So that information will be extremely helpful to pass along as well. So appreciate that. All right. So yeah. The left wing of the UK is rallying together behind their prime minister, who appointed pedophile ringleaders to high positions of power. Imagine that.
Andrew Mountbatten Windsor appears to have knowingly shared confidential information with Jeffrey Epstein when, as Prince Andrew, he was a UK trade envoy. Emails seen by the BBC from the...
See, I mean, that's just straight up corruption. Not only that, you're talking to a Mossad agent. So not only are you doing insider trading, which you shouldn't be doing anyway, you're doing it with a foreign spy. Granted, did he know he was a foreign spy? Probably not. But here's the other problem. You did know that he was doing the child sex trafficking, and you did know that he was Israeli. So at least a foreign agent of some sort, and you were committing crimes on his behalf. So Prince Andrew, or whatever they're calling him now, was committing the big crimes. It is being revealed in the emails, which Pam Bondi says isn't enough to go commit charges on, and was committing like crimes against the state. Major crimes, financial crimes against the state.
The recently released Epstein files show Mr. Mountbatten Windsor apparently passing on details of investment opportunities. Official guidance says trade envoys have a duty of confidentiality with sensitive commercial or political information. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been contacted for comment. Here's our investigations correspondent, Andy Verity.
This is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in the present day, stripped of his titles and roles after revelations of his past dealings with Jeffrey Epstein.
Embarrassment, sir. Is Andrew resigning?
He was already under pressure about it 15 years ago, after newspaper revelations in March 2011 saying the financier, already by then convicted of soliciting a child for prostitution, had helped pay off his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson's debts. Emails in the latest batch of files released by the US Department of Justice appear to indicate that weeks earlier, on the 30th of November 2010, the then Prince received reports about his official visits as a British trade envoy to Vietnam, Singapore and China. 5 minutes later, he sent them to Epstein.
I'm carrying on.
The former Duke of York told Newsnight he last saw Epstein in early December 2010 to break off their friendship.
I have no recollection.
But on Christmas Eve, he emailed Epstein a briefing he knew was confidential on investment opportunities in the reconstruction of Helmand Province, Afghanistan, funded by British government money. And further...
See, war profiteering isn't just from weapon sales, it's also being tapped to rebuild the regions that were destroyed. And apparently Britain was in charge of rebuilding parts of Afghanistan. Like, it's not even just the individual conspiracy of he is talking to this piece of shit right here, but it's the additional crimes that are being committed and the additional conspiracy of we're going to profit off of this war. It's such a cycle of ruin that is being revealed in these files. It's absolutely batshit.
Emails show he was still suggesting other investments for Epstein weeks later.
Oh yes, I purposely have disallowed links, URLs to be posted in chat. So yes, Anna, I'll leave you to handle that.
Under official guidance, trade envoys have a duty of confidentiality over sensitive commercial or political information about relevant visits. The former Duke of York has been contacted for comment, but has not responded. Andy Verity, BBC News.
Oh boy, okay, so it's 9:40.
Tonight.
Nope, we definitely have to cover this. So, for those of you who may not remember or are aware of Jamal Khashoggi being murdered and why that's a big fucking deal, is that he was an American reporter that was murdered in Saudi Arabia for covering the prince. And I do forget what was being covered, but he was murdered and the United States government did absolutely fucking nothing about it. And that was a bad enough conspiracy on its own, except now it's been escalated to something even worse because it evidently had something to do with Epstein. Which again, Epstein is bad enough by himself. But because he has his fingers in the pots of geopolitical interactions and negotiations and diplomacy globally, it means that Epstein could have been and might have been and is alleged to have orchestrated many of the conflicts across the globe over the past few decades.
Epstein files in the spotlight once again as the late pedophile's private messages link the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi to the United Arab Emirates. You're watching Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Elia Batul. Canada has officially opened its first permanent consulate in Nuuk, Greenland. Experts say the move sends a...
Whoa. Not that I have any problem talking about Greenland right now, but Khashoggi. Let's focus on that.
Relations war, saying that Saudi Arabia risked losing political support in Washington. In the same messages, Epstein rebranded Khashoggi as a terrorist. He also described the killing as a failed covert operation. The files further show Epstein receiving an urgent meeting request allegedly linked to bin Zayed the same night. Separately, an FBI memo claims Epstein has ties to U.S. and Israeli intelligence. It says the late pedophile was trained as a Mossad agent under former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Iran says indirect talks with the United States have wrapped up in Oman after weeks of rising fears of military confrontation.
Okay. Ma'am. You can't have a 5-minute video with this headline and then only talk about that section for 30 seconds. Hello? Okay. So, according to the Epstein files, the Khashoggi murder was a failed intelligence operation, i.e. a failed assassination by something akin to the CIA. That's not nothing, because again, why is Epstein involved in any of this, right? But of course, it's being revealed that he was a power broker. He was a financier. He was negotiating behind the scenes between countries, between terrorist groups, between countries and terrorist groups. He was literally orchestrating world events from Lolita Island, or whatever the fuck they call it, while engaging in blackmail activities like the assault of children, and or murder of children, and or cannibalism of children. And what's even worse is that this isn't even the worst thing, right? There's allegations, or there is context in the emails that suggests Epstein was behind 9/11, the global war on terror, covering those things up, the conflicts and the resolutions that happened in I think with Pakistan and I think India. I mean, it's always Pakistan and India when it's Pakistan. But point being, there were many conflicts, many terrorist organizations, many negotiations with those terrorist organizations that were literally, according to the emails, facilitated or orchestrated by Epstein, or that Epstein was at least aware of them before they happened. Like, it would be bad enough if all of these global conflicts were linked. That would be bad enough. But the fact that it's the pedophile ring makes it that much worse. And that he was a Mossad agent meaning acting on behalf of and reporting to Israel, meaning all of the global conflicts, the global war on terror, the economic crises, because yes, that was listed in there too. All of the terrorist negotiations and this, that, and the other, the cover-ups, the scandals, were literally, not figuratively and not metaphorically, literally orchestrated by Israel through their number one Mossad agent, Jeffrey fucking Epstein. Like, that is mind-blowing. It's so mind-blowing that it airs on the side of QAnon conspiracy, and I probably sound like a psychopath repeating it. But I am repeating what is in the emails. What the man himself said and has been revealed to have done. You know how they say truth is stranger than fiction, right? If 1984 were instead rewritten about the past, of the revelations of the past just even 12 months, you would be like, that is the stupidest story ever. That is entirely over the top. There is no way that shit would actually happen in real life. Like, that is too much bat fuckery to be taken seriously. And yet, it is happening. I'm coming in and Orwell mentioned. Yeah, well, it be like that, right? So, what else do we got in here? Okay, we have we have two good news videos. 12 minutes. Okay, we can watch this one.
So as you know on the show, we've been covering the war in Sudan, which is both a civil war spilling into a regional war. It is a proxy war, and it is also creating the worst humanitarian crisis on the entire planet. Our next...
Is it actually worse than Palestinians about to be wiped off the face of the earth? Because I don't think it's worse than that. But we actually covered this already. So
as you know on the show, we've been covering the war in Sudan, which is...
New Jeffrey Epstein files have reignited explosive claims that the convicted pedophile secretly worked as a foreign intelligence asset. Messages from the latest batch of docs reportedly include references to Israel's spy agency Mossad and secret surveillance equipment that was allegedly installed across Epstein's homes. The documents appear to paint a murky picture of Epstein's international contacts and fuel speculation that he gathered compromising information on powerful figures. According to The Times, newly released files include claims from a confidential FBI informant that the billionaire pedo was a co-opted Mossad agent. The FBI report from October 2020 said the source had become convinced that Epstein was a co-opted Mossad agent and alleged that the financier had been trained as a spy. The report claimed that Epstein had links to U.S. and allied intelligence circles through his longtime lawyer Alan Dershowitz, citing elite academic and political connections. But Dershowitz dismissed the allegations. Epstein himself appeared anxious about the rumors. In a 2018 email to former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, he asked him to make clear that I don't work for Mossad. The files also appeared to show how Epstein had extensive Israeli business and travel interests. These include investments in an Israeli surveillance-linked startup and multiple trips to Tel Aviv dating back decades. Epstein also reportedly ordered staff to install hidden motion-activated cameras in his homes. Emails show Epstein asking his pilot and handyman Larry Vizowski to buy 3 motion-detected hidden cameras that can record. Several of Epstein's victims, including his most prominent accuser Virginia Giuffre, have long claimed that they were secretly filmed. But Epstein denied having hidden cameras. In a 2006 email sent to himself, he said that reports of hidden surveillance were misleading, claiming that cops were aware of the cameras and that they had an innocent explanation.
So, That should give everybody warm fuzzies tonight, right? I don't know how else to, like, this is The Sun, which is yet another one of those trusted news sources, right? I'm not the one saying and claiming that Jeffrey Epstein is a Mossad agent and a Russian spy and this, that, and the other, that he has ties to boatloads of international foreign agencies, and that he has been involved in a boatload of bad things. That is literally what is being reported. And it's barely scratching the surface, by the way. Because 3 million documents, you can't put that in a 2-minute video, a 10-minute video. You couldn't even do that in a 24-hour video. So, we're going to wrap up the stream with some good news for a change. Something that I have been desperately trying to do, but we have had a hard time, just getting to a point where we could talk about good news, but also finding the good news in the first place, because it gets drowned out by the bad news. Let's see. Just managed to drop by momentarily because uni kind of stressy at the moment. Yeah, imagine that, right? I thought that woman was AI. Which woman? The woman that just did this, or the woman that was, well, what from, yeah, I don't know. I don't know which video you're referencing. That reporter talks and looks like AI. Okay, so this one then. I think she just doesn't have much of a personality. That's okay. Well, just handed in the presentation of my project 2 days before due, so I'm feeling pretty good. All right. Well, good luck on your project. We're going to watch this.
The BBC's Indian Sportswoman of the Year award is going to be announced next week, and it honours the country's leading female athletes. In a nation where millions of girls are still illegally married as children, sport can offer a rare path to independence. For some, football has become a way to push back, helping them earn an income, build confidence.
For all the Americans on stream right now, football is soccer everywhere else in the world.
And resist pressure to marry early. In the northwestern state of Rajasthan, Divya Arya has been meeting the girls using the game to change their futures.
Munna was only 14 when she was told she would be a bride. Child marriage is illegal in India, but the United Nations estimates that 216 million girls and women have been married before they turned 18.
Okay. First of all, there is no such thing as a woman that is under the age of 18. And we can even debate that full maturity doesn't even happen until 25. So let's just be clear on that. And the fact that the reporter is saying girls and women under the age of 18. So what are you considering a woman? 16, 17? That's disgusting. 15? 14? Disgusting. Those are children. And again, we can argue that even 18 and 19 is children. We can argue all the way up until 25 that it's children. If we want to be real technical in terms of development, right? Frontal lobe development, we can go very far. Now, social maturity, we can talk all the way up until the 30s. But to say that under the age of 18 is women, disgusting. And that's coming from the BBC on the cusp, on the tailwinds of the Epstein conspiracy being unraveled.
I started crying. I said, I don't want to marry right now. I'm in grade 9. I want to study.
Munna's mother was a child bride herself and arranged for Munna's older sister to have a child marriage. Authorities try to stop child marriages, but they say they often get little cooperation from local communities.
They say that if girls step out of their homes, they will be exposed to bad influences and run away with boys. We do the marriage quietly. We don't print a wedding invitation or put up a tent.
Munna too may have become a child bride, but she was introduced to football by a women's rights organization. The Football for Freedom project has trained over 800 girls across 13 villages in Rajasthan over the past decade. And it's taught them much more than just sport.
When we worked with the girls and they learnt about their rights, about the country's constitution, the ill effects of child marriage, and because girls were stepping out, they were able to raise their voices.
Okay. This is not quite the feel-good video that I was hoping for, because this is offering a very bleak insight to what happens when you have isolated communities in a large country who are ignoring the laws of that country. If that sounds familiar, it should, because rural America tends to act on its own in complete disregard for the Constitution and whatever else, and taking the law and society into its own hands. That is also true even in urban and suburban areas. The reason being, there are microcosms of culture, even within white culture, especially in conservative groups. Because child marriage is not limited to India. That is a thing that is now happening in America, or rather has been happening in America, and is expanding, not rapidly, but is expanding in ultra-religious areas in the country. And because it's happening within a community, there is no enforcement of it because everybody's involved in the game. Which is another reason why pedophilia has become more and more normalized in society, or at least not as taboo as it was 30 years ago, which is what allowed the pedophile ring Epstein created to thrive. And they were probably the ones instituting the normalization, which I don't know if that was necessarily mentioned in the email, so I'm not going to say that. But for instance, targeting the LGBTQ community and especially trans community was in part to create a social divide, to force an entire demographic into desperation and poverty so that they can become more vulnerable to being picked up by these sick sociopaths. Okay? So, there is a reason why powerful, influential, conservative people prey on children, have pushed for the nuclear family ideology, because it would instill patriarchy as the standard to control the information that is given to the rest of the family unit by society. Again, not my words. What's in the files and what has been pushed in our society for generations. Sometimes the good news are just dystopian nightmares disguised as good news. Yeah, no kidding. Well, you have pre-made marriages. To be honest, they have no human rights or children's rights, just saying as an Indian. Well, that's kind of the point of India might be a developing or developed country, but it clearly has a lot of steps to take still. And granted, we can argue culture, this, that, and the other, but at the end of the day, and you're right. You're right about the African people being viewed as subhumans and in other countries, not just Western countries. But yes, India. I mean, racism and discrimination is not unique to Western countries either, which makes that even worse. Yeah. So, yeah, Jason, you're definitely, you have a much better visibility on this issue from the direct path. I can only see it from the outside looking in. Okay, let's try an objectively good piece of news.
Thousands of years ago, the first Arabian horses were bred here in the Arabian Peninsula. They were prized by Bedouin tribes, valued for their endurance and intelligence, essential qualities for survival in the harsh desert conditions. The ancestry of any Arabian horse anywhere in the world can be traced back here to the original bloodlines of the peninsula. And that's a big part of what makes this event so special. Since launching in 2021, the Qatar International Arabian Horse Festival has grown rapidly. It's now hosting two of the sport's most lucrative competitions, attracting owners and breeders from more than a dozen countries, eager to showcase at least 545 registered horses and compete for multi-million-dollar prizes. Horses at Wynyard often become highly sought after by breeders around the world. So how do they win?
You know how the dog shows, you get to run with your little Fido, your little Shih Tzu, and run around with the leash? These poor bastards are trying to keep up with a fucking horse. Good luck.
They enter the ring with Arabian spirit. Handlers sprint with them, aiming to show how each animal comes as close as possible to the ideal Arabian horse. They're famous for their distinctive head shape and their high tails. Judges look at the balance of their bodies, their agility, evaluate their legs, whether they move smoothly, rhythmically. But most importantly, they're looking for horses that feel Arabian, horses that have presence. And it's this kind of knowledge and tradition that the festival organizers are hoping to share with people far beyond the sport. It's not
So Prince Ali from... is that the horse he rode in on?
Not just a horse show. The event combines art, poetry, and interactive exhibitions to showcase Arabian heritage and Qatar's legacy. Some of the most famous Arabian stallions and mares have come from the country's breeding program. Children can play and explore, adults can browse the market stalls, all surrounded by the galleries, restaurants, and museums of Doha's unique cultural village, Qatara. This is a celebration of Arabian horses in a place inextricably linked to their heritage. And while there's enormous wealth in the sport, the festival is open to everyone. Tickets for the general public are free. Alexandra Byers, Al Jazeera, Doha.
An objectively good video. Yay. Horsies. Horse culture. Woo. So, that brings us to the end of our stream. We are actively trying to end our streams with honest to God good videos, but as you saw, even the videos that are feel good are usually just dystopian wrapped in good feel good bubble wrap. So, more to come, right? So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the stream. We had actually 3 new followers today. That's impressive. 2 of those followers were, no, all 3 of those followers were from our local district here in Ohio. So, outstanding. We are building our platform locally and nationally, and as the case may be, internationally. So, this is great. This is exactly what we are working towards. That's exactly what your viewership provides, right? So, please continue to like, share, and subscribe. Please continue to be part of this growing platform and this growing movement. And we will see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. sharp, as we do Recap Thursdays, where we cover anything that we may have missed or anything new that may have transpired since Tuesday. So, on that note, I think I covered all my bases. Samuel Ronan. Oh, hold on. One last bit. How's the elections going? We are kicking ass, and the proof is in the pudding that we got 3 new followers from the district to the stream. So, keep it up. Keep up the good work. Ronan 2026. See you tomorrow.